Hello and welcome to Chinese Novel Audiobook. Explore our playlist for more captivating novels, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Oh no, I'm a follower of Slaanesh. Impossible, absolutely impossible. On the lush green plains, a handsome man with black hair and black eyes, and fair skin, shouted loudly. His name was Eden, a young wage slave from the 21st century. Last night, he stayed up late playing Warhammer, felt a sharp pain in his heart, passed out, and when he opened his eyes again, he found himself in this strange place. This isn't a transmigration, it's a dream. Eden was sure of it. Because he was surrounded by beautiful women. All around him, on the grass and by the river, were women of various types. There were mature ladies, cute lawless, beautiful beast girls, high heels, black stockings, and long legs, all of them hit his preferences hard. What was even more terrifying was that he could vaguely recognize some of them as familiar faces from his drive folder and his 2D waifus. Tifa, Kamisato Ayaka, sure enough, dreams have everything in them. Since he was already here, Eden decided to enjoy this dream to the fullest. He walked toward the girls, intending to have a little conversation with them. But an inexplicable sense of danger made him stop in his tracks. Something feels off, like I'm forgetting something. Eden cautiously scanned his surroundings. A gentle breeze brushed his face, the sweet scent of flowers and grass filled the air, and the solid ground beneath his feet, everything was so real. Too real. As Eden hesitated, the sweet scent in the air grew stronger, permeating his senses. The hormonal surge brought by the scent took over his brain, gradually robbing him of his judgment. It's just a spring dream, what's there to worry about? If I wait too long, what if I wake up? Before Eden knew it, he had reached the girls. They gazed at him with alluring eyes, filled with anticipation. Come on, I feel so uncomfortable. Won't you hold me, young master? Their trembling voices, soft and seductive, were like a devil's whisper that completely dismantled Eden's resistance. Forget it. Eden couldn't suppress the desire in his heart any longer, letting it run wild as he fell into depravity. In an instant, darkness engulfed everything. His consciousness seemed to plunge into an endless abyss, sinking deeper and deeper without end. Where is this place? Eden's remaining consciousness pondered this question as he gradually approached oblivion. But just before he faded away, a ray of light suddenly broke through. A mysterious and warm power awakened Eden's consciousness, giving him a brief moment of clarity. I remember now. Eden suddenly opened his eyes and looked around. The green fields, the tempting fragrance, the soft bodies, the endless pleasure. Oh crap, this setup, isn't this the palace of Slaanesh? That's right, Eden had transmigrated. Last night, while playing the game, he had been joking with his teammates. They were saying things like, God Emperor above, Slaanesh below, and, I don't fast forward through videos, I'm a follower of Slaanesh. He had been typing furiously on his keyboard, if I enter Warhammer, I would definitely serve Slaanesh, Slaanesh forever. Before he could finish typing, his heart had seized, and he lost consciousness, only to transmigrate into the Warhammer 40k universe. Eden was completely dumbfounded. Jokes were jokes, but how had this become reality? The world of Warhammer 40k was extremely brutal, with almost no hope for ordinary people. If you weren't cannon fodder sent to the front lines to die in battles against aliens and chaos, then you'd be in an Imperial factory, grinding yourself to death. That would actually be considered a good death. At least you would have contributed to the great God Emperor and received his blessing. But far worse was falling into the clutches of the Chaos Gods. They would twist you into a monster through endless torment. You'd wish for death but never find it. And now, Eden had fallen into the hands of one of the Chaos Gods. This was their palace. The god was named Slaanesh. A hermaphroditic god of pleasure, impossible to resist. Oh no, I've really become a follower of Slaanesh. Eden was in despair, thinking he was going to be ravaged by Slaanesh. No, he wasn't even qualified for that. Being ravaged by Slaanesh was something reserved for primarchs or demon princes. At best, Eden would be taken by Slaanesh's demonettes. And as it happened, he was in a place teeming with demonettes. This was the third circle of Slaanesh's palace, the circle of lust, a depraved land filled with hedonistic pleasure. Eden looked at the girls. They were so real, so captivating. But deep down, he knew they were all demonettes. Demonettes take on the most alluring forms to tempt Slaanesh's followers. They make you fall into extreme ecstasy, twisting and corrupting you into a monster. It's over, starting off with such intensity, huh? I mean, what Warhammer fan could withstand this trial? SS's, huff. Don't do this. Eden struggled to maintain his clarity, fighting the urge to give in. He pushed the demonettes away, but they quickly surrounded him again. Am I not beautiful? I'll try my best to make you happy. Tonight, you are mine. Get away from me. Eden pulled his hand away from, not so hot, and shoved Tifa aside, flipping over the demon that had pounced on him. In that moment, he saw the truth. The playful and seductive expressions turned into snarling whispers. The demonettes' bodies twisted grotesquely, their faces hideous, with black, hollow eyes and ears. Their long, pointed tongues licked Eden's face and body, leaving behind a sticky, disgusting fluid. Slaanesh's demonettes. Quickly, they returned to their previous forms, even more enchanting than before. They increased their allure, pulling out all the stops. Who can resist this? No, this couldn't go on. Eden mustered all his willpower to resist the corruption of his desires. He didn't want to become Slaanesh's fodder. But the corruption had already begun. To his horror, Eden saw that his hand had twisted into a dark, clawed form. What can I do? Who can save me from the grasp of the Chaos Gods? Suddenly, a flash of inspiration struck Eden. He thought of that great man. He went by many names: the Emperor, the immortal God Emperor, the great God Emperor, the Omnizeia, the cold son of the void. As humanity's beacon of faith, the Emperor was real and possessed godlike powers. Like granting blessings, protection, resurrection, the existence of the Legion of the Damned was proof of that. Eden decided to put his faith in the Emperor, hoping for a last-minute miracle. As a transmigrator, shouldn't he have some special perks? Plus, he was mostly loyal to the Emperor, right? Eden felt a little guilty, but whatever, right now, he was the Emperor's most loyal follower. No one could stop him now. Eden closed his eyes and prayed loudly, offering his loyalty to the Emperor. With all my strength, with all my will, with all my soul. I swear, my soul and my faith belong to the immortal Emperor, humanity's shepherd. The prayer didn't work, and the corruption deepened. Eden's eyes began to loosen, his skin peeling off. He was about to turn into a monster. An overwhelming sense of despair hit him. But he didn't give up. His prayers grew more frantic, clinging to this last lifeline. Please, with your grace, watch over me. Guard your servant and warrior. Please, in this peril, bless me. The prayer ended, but nothing happened. At this point, Eden didn't even have the strength to speak. Desire had deeply rooted itself in his consciousness. He was on the verge of being completely corrupted into Slaanesh's slave, never to be free. But he still wanted to live, even in this brutal world. At the last moment before losing consciousness, Eden saw the sun. A massive, cold sun, suspended in the void. Praise the sun, praise the Emperor. Chapter 2, Is Slaanesh chasing me? The Emperor responded. Above the void, the cold sun forged by the Emperors will shone like a star, so sacred and divine. Buzz. The waves of the psychic tide spread out. Despite the endless distance, Eden could still feel the surging psychic energy. What immense power. He quickly reacted, calling out within his consciousness, "Your loyal servant needs saving, Emperor." But the sun representing the Emperor gave no response, and no gaze fell upon Eden. The Emperor slumbered, allowing his light to shine impartially. Another wave of psychic energy hit, and before he could react, Eden was kicked out of the psychic space. He opened his eyes to see the green plains and the tempting bodies surrounding him. He was still in Slaanesh's palace. Plop! An eyeball fell to the ground, and Eden instinctively bent down to pick it up. It took him a moment to realize that his eye socket was empty. My eye! Eden quickly shoved the eyeball back in place, too shocked to feel fear, his mind racing with questions. How could this be? Didn't the Emperor manifest? Why is nothing happening? Does he think I'm not loyal enough? It turns out last-minute prayers don't work. Now he was truly doomed. Above the void, in the core of Slaanesh's palace, a gigantic purple shadow slowly manifested. It was the master of the palace, Slaanesh. Eden was furious, and since he was about to die, he didn't care anymore. With his one good eye, he flipped the bird toward the void and cursed, "Slaanesh, I curse your ancestors." The shadow shifted slightly, and its gaze turned toward him. Wherever its gaze fell, the demons knelt. A powerful pressure surged toward him, and when the gaze locked onto Eden, the overwhelming force almost crushed him in an instant. But then, the warm force from earlier appeared again, surrounding him with a golden light. Space fluctuated violently, and a small rift opened up. That mysterious power, defying Slaanesh's pressure, pulled Eden out of Slaanesh's palace. Slaanesh's gaze paused briefly, seemingly surprised. The god let out a soft chuckle, and an even greater desire erupted. The entire palace quivered with life, ushering in an even more intense frenzy. The Lord of Pleasure had taken note of this little insect and would personally prepare the most extreme pleasures for him. At the same time, in the distant void of the warp, a small sun radiated warm light, hiding beneath the grandeur of the great cold sun. Eden screamed, feeling as if his body and soul were being stretched like noodles. Then he was thrown into a washing machine, violently spun around, and finally pulled out and slammed into some solid entity. In the peaceful sector of the Imperium, in the northern region of the Goli system, lay the planet Urth. This was a typical industrial world, where deadly pollution covered the surface, and mutants ran rampant. In the center of the continent, the hive city of Grant towered above the land, a mountain of metal housing tens of billions of people. Every breath of air and every drop of water inside the hive city had been recycled millions of times. People survived on corpse starch and worked day and night, praying for the Emperor's blessing. Life here was harsh, except for those at the very top. The most powerful among them was the planetary governor, who held absolute authority, with the power of life and death. At the top of the hive, in the king's court, inside a massive mansion, combining Victorian and steampunk styles, an opulent bedroom glittered with luxury. Eden woke up screaming, "I'm alive." Eden realized he was unharmed and breathed a sigh of relief. The Emperor must have saved him. Belief in the Emperor really could save lives in the Warhammer universe. He decided to carry a copy of the Imperial Creed with him at all times and read it often, maybe even memorize it. Praise the Emperor. As the tension eased, Eden noticed his unfamiliar surroundings. Where am I now? Shattered fragments of memories rushed into his consciousness, forcefully entering his mind. After absorbing the memory fragments, Eden finally understood the whole story. It was quite complicated. The planetary governor of Urth, Eden Grant, had indulged in excessive drinking and pleasures, engaging in inappropriate activities with a maid in his bedroom. Playing too recklessly, he had fallen victim to chaos corruption and was dragged into Slaanesh's palace, where his already weakened body perished in terror. Eden's soul happened to transmigrate into the body of the deceased Eden Grant, which led to the thrilling and terrifying scenes he had just experienced. Luckily, the Emperor's blessing had saved him. Eden had inherited both Grant's body and memories. Now, he had the signature black hair of the Grant family, with deep eyes and a pale face that looked a bit stern. Overall, he appeared somewhat frail. But on the whole, he had become more handsome. The only trouble was that the memories he inherited were incomplete. Many parts were missing or hazy, as though shrouded in mist. But regardless, Eden was now the planetary governor of the Imperium and the ruler of Urth, Eden Grant. This was misfortune mixed with a little luck. The night was deep, and the faint red moonlight filtered through the stained glass windows of the balcony, casting a soft glow into the room. A disturbing sound, like bones grinding together, came from the darkness. What the hell is that noise? Eden immediately became alert. Did you forget about me? A woman was facing the wall, her body shaking with sobs. It was the horrifying head of a Slaaneshi demonette, with hollow eye sockets and sharp teeth, and a long, dripping tongue. Oh crap, is it chasing me here? Can't get rid of it, huh? Why aren't you saying anything? Don't you think I'm beautiful? The demonette's body twisted and emerged from the shadows, bathed in moonlight, its deformed figure covered in spikes. The black maid uniform she wore was tattered. There was no doubt, this was the maid, now fully corrupted into a monster. Couldn't wait for me, could you, my dear? The demonette swayed her hips as she approached the bed seductively, but the grotesque scene only made her more terrifying. She climbed onto the bed, staring down at Eden. Let's have some fun. I'm not feeling great today, how about another time? Eden forced a stiff smile, trying not to provoke her. Using his memory, he discreetly pressed the alarm button beside the bed. But the demonette's long, pointed tongue slid across Eden's face. I can't wait any longer. To hell with you. Eden kicked the demonette off him and, remembering where it was hidden, pulled a miniature pistol from a secret compartment, aiming it at her and pulling the trigger. Bang! A puff of smoke erupted from the gun as the bullet hit the demonette's chest, causing her to fall backward. Was it over? Ouch! The demonette stood up again, staring at Eden with a raspy voice. But I like it. Hit me again. An SM-loving demonette. Well, I do enjoy helping others. Eden pulled the trigger again, but no bullet came out. What's going on? Has the machine spirit displeased me? He glanced at the ivory and gem-encrusted pistol in his hand and silently cursed Eden Grant's ancestors. What kind of idiot uses a single-shot, black powder antique pistol for self-defense? If you wanted protection, you should at least have a lasgun or a melta. Eden threw the gun at the demonette and took the chance to flee the bed. But his body, weakened from indulgence, was too frail. After only a few steps, he collapsed to the ground. Struggling to get up, he saw the demonette charging toward him with a hideous face. Chapter 3: The Awakening of Psychic Powers. Enjoy the pleasure. The demonette's claws slowly tore Eden's clothes, leaving thin, bloody scratches one after another. She was toying with her prey, wanting him to die in extreme fear and torment. For followers of Slaanesh, slaughter is also a form of pleasure. Slaanesh's followers loved to host group orgies at gatherings, sharing the ultimate pleasures, but these often devolved into mutual slaughter. When the hive enforcers arrived, they often couldn't find a single intact corpse, and sometimes bodies were even fused together. They would tear the flesh off each other and swallow it in the ecstasy of their perverse rituals. Eden knew that if nothing unexpected happened, the demonette in front of him would eviscerate and torture him to death. But he still had a chance. He had already called for help, all he needed to do was buy time. Eden gritted his teeth and began to inch his way toward the bedroom door. The demonette didn't mind, patiently leaving more and more scratches on his body, his blood dragging long trails across the floor. Warhammer 40k is too hard. Even being a planetary governor isn't safe. Eden clenched his teeth and kept moving, his chances of survival were growing. As long as he could hold on until the guards arrived, he might make it. Finally, he reached the door and stretched out his hand to push it open, but all he felt was a cold wall. An illusion. Eden turned back to see the demonette blocking the way, a mocking expression in her hollow eye sockets. She was laughing at him. The illusion she had cast had led him into a dead end, and even if the guards arrived, his chances of survival were slim. You can die now. The demonette had clearly had enough fun. She licked her claws and struck down viciously. The claws slashed through the air, too fast for Eden to see clearly with the naked eye, and he didn't even have time to raise his hand in defense. This strike would cut him in half. Suddenly, Eden felt time slow down. The demonette's claws became clearer in his vision, and he could even see the fine hairs on them. Am I really going to die right after escaping? Eden refused to accept this. He twisted his body, trying to avoid the vital areas. As long as he could keep breathing, there would still be a chance. With his strong will to survive, that familiar power from deep within his soul exploded once again. Power surged forth instantly, and time seemed to freeze. The demonette's claws hovered in midair, unable to move. At some point, a thin layer of frost had also formed on the ground. Eden's eyes crackled with golden lightning, arcs of electricity surrounding his body, occasionally striking the ground. Finally, the power has arrived. I knew it, there's no way I could survive in Warhammer 40k without a cheat. Eden stood up, his cells rejoicing as his entire body and soul filled with electrical energy. His wounds gradually scabbed over and began to heal. The feeling was incredible, though the faint whispers in the void were somewhat annoying. Those were the calls from the warp. If he wasn't mistaken, he had awakened psychic powers, becoming a psyker. However, becoming a psyker wasn't necessarily a good thing. Psykers were considered a destabilizing factor in the Imperium, as they were extremely susceptible to corruption by the horrors of the warp. The Imperium constantly hunted and captured psychers, sending them on the black ships of the Astra Telepathica to Holy Terra for testing. Those who could resist corruption would serve the Imperium, while the unqualified ones would be sent to the Golden Throne to have their souls burned as fuel for the Emperor. It was said that the black ships delivered 1,000 psychers every day to be consumed, sustaining the Astronomicon. This allowed the Imperium's warp travel and communication networks to remain functional. So Eden's situation as a psyker wasn't exactly optimistic. If his identity were exposed, even as a planetary governor, the Imperium would monitor him, and there was a chance he could be taken away on the black ships. If he failed the test, he would be sent to the Golden Throne to serve the Emperor in death. These thoughts flashed through Eden's mind before he snapped back to reality. Now wasn't the time to worry about that, he had to deal with the demonette first. Die! Die! The demonette was furious that her prey had escaped. She roared and struggled, filled with a savage desire to kill. She broke free of the restraints and charged at Eden, determined to tear this loathsome human to pieces and devour him bit by bit. However, a fist crackling with golden lightning shot upward, striking her abdomen and sending her flying through the air, spitting out foul liquid. "What are you thinking, sweetheart?" Eden followed up with another punch, smashing the demonette's face. "Stay down." The demonette's face twisted and deformed as she flew through the stained glass window and crashed onto the balcony, motionless. Is she dead? Eden didn't approach to check, wary of a final counterattack. After all, he was still made of flesh and blood. A single well-placed spike could end his life. His caution was justified, as the demonette was not dead yet. She suddenly sprang up, her half-shattered skull glaring at him with intense malice, radiating a thick, chilling aura. She had grown even stronger. "All right, if that's how you want to play." Just as Eden was about to engage in a life-or-death struggle, a commotion from outside caught his attention, the heavy footsteps of combat boots stomping on the ground. He immediately halted and dissipated his psychic energy. "Governor!" Boom! In the next moment, the bedroom door was smashed open. Eden's most loyal captain of the guard, Carter Crowley, led a squad of fully armed guards into the room. The guards each carried an Imperial pattern bolt gun, and they wore ceramite armor. Their physiques were far beyond that of normal men. Trained to perfection, they instantly formed up around Eden, protecting him while aiming their bolt guns at the demonette on the balcony. Eden breathed a sigh of relief and pointed at the demonette. "Finish." Boom! Before he could finish, the guards had already pulled the triggers, their weapons flashing as bullets poured out. The rounds crisscrossed in the air, tearing the demonette's body apart like a rag doll. After the first volley, they reloaded and fired another round. After 2 volleys of fire, Captain Carter quickly approached the demonette. He drew his chainsword and vertically sliced through the demonette's head, sending flesh and blood flying. Then Carter gave the corpse a mighty kick, sending the body and part of the marble railing tumbling off the balcony. After dealing with the demonette, Carter turned and half-knelt before Eden, his determined face full of resolve. "Governor, the heretic has been executed." As soon as he spoke, a dull thud echoed from below as the demonette's body hit the ground. Eden looked toward the balcony, where a cool breeze blew in through the broken window. Bathed in moonlight, the blood-splattered balcony and bedroom resembled the scene of a brutal crime. "These guys are pretty tough." Eden studied the guards. It seemed they had undergone some form of enhancement, as their physiques far exceeded those of normal men. Captain Carter's figure was particularly impressive, easily over 2 meters tall, with a muscular build. Genetic enhancements. Their size was almost comparable to that of a space marine. This family was definitely something. The guards exchanged uneasy glances, thinking their governor was about to reprimand them, and bowed their heads in silence. "Very good, excellent spirit. You've done well." Eden nodded approvingly, pulling Carter up and patting him on the shoulder, making the captain a little flustered. "Brutality is good, brutality is exactly what we need. In this world, plagued by chaos, only real tough men could hold the line." Eden's fear had completely vanished, he had realized something important. All fear stems from insufficient firepower. He needed to grow his power, build armies, and send out endless legions to cover all his enemies in devastating firepower. Slanesh, right, I'll remember this. One day, I'll have my revenge on you. Just as Eden's thoughts drifted, a nervous voice interrupted him. By the Emperor, are you all right, my lord? Bayev Cotton, the Grant family's senior steward, rushed into the room, looking worried. As Eden's confidant, Bayev managed all the affairs and personnel of the royal court. He even helped with some governmental matters, a man with significant responsibilities. Bayev's eyes briefly flicked to the faint frost still lingering on the ground, and he furrowed his brow slightly. Chapter 4. The governor's nightlife seems quite exciting. My lord. Bayev looked at Eden with some suspicion. Since awakening his psychic powers, Eden's senses had become much sharper. He immediately noticed something was off with Bayev. The steward must have sensed something. I'm all right physically, Eden decided to reveal the truth. If I hadn't awakened my psychic powers, I would have died at the hands of the heretic. Although his inherited memories were incomplete, he was fortunate to have access to the memories of his steward and the guards. Their sole mission was to protect Eden, the last bloodline of the Grant family, and they were absolutely loyal. These people were Eden's final line of defense, and there was no need to deceive them. Upon hearing Eden's response, Bayev breathed a sigh of relief. Praise the Emperor. As long as you are safe, my lord. He then continued. Tonight's attack was premeditated. Someone used the heretic monster to lure the guards away, putting you in danger. Internal strife or an assassination attempt by rival forces. The fog of missing memories left Eden with no clue. This was clearly a dangerous situation. He looked at Bayev and asked, who do you think is behind it? I've already sent people to investigate. It must be those damned Homan family bastards. Bayev spat out angrily, a bunch of treacherous scum. The Emperor will punish them. Eden tried to recall information about the Homan family, but nothing came to mind. He decided he'd look into it later. He nodded along, mimicking Bayev's righteous tone. The Emperor will indeed punish them. Eden underwent a checkup by the apothecary, who confirmed that aside from some weakness, he was in no serious condition. After confirming that Eden was fine, Bayev and the others finally left, reassured. Since the room was no longer suitable for sleep, Eden was led by the maids to another equally spacious bedroom. Eden opened the stained glass windows and stepped out onto the balcony, gazing at the pale red moon in the sky. He sighed deeply. This wasn't Earth anymore, nor was it the universe he was familiar with. The moon of this planet appeared to have been struck by some kind of weapon, with a small chunk missing, and a narrow belt of debris forming a meteorite ring around it. The scene before him served as a stark reminder of the brutality of the Warhammer universe. Whether it was fighting aliens, chaos gods, or even civil wars, each conflict claimed countless lives, and entire planets were often destroyed. Even as a planetary governor, Eden couldn't guarantee his safety. But as the highest-ranking person on this planet, he was still far better off than the workers who toiled day and night in the lower hive, or the scavengers in the underhive sifting through toxic waste. He lived in the palace at the top of the hive, in the tower of the royal court, enjoying the best resources and overlooking the masses. Eden looked toward the large square of the royal court district. The lights were dim, the ground pockmarked, and the towering statue of the emperor seemed to be missing a piece. Further out, in the residential areas, vast sections were completely dark, with only faint glimmers of light visible here and there. Eden was surprised. This infrastructure is really bad, I'll have to find an opportunity to renovate this place. As the face of the planet, the royal court district couldn't look so shabby. Suddenly, a faint flash of light appeared in the residential area. With his psychic sensitivity, Eden realized it was the flash of a bomb. Someone's fighting. Is the upper hive's security this bad? Eden was puzzled. The upper hive, where nobles and officials lived, shouldn't have such poor security. Are the enforcers just slacking off? The enforcers' discipline needs some serious reform. Since Eden had inherited everything from Eden Grant, his fate was now tied to this planet's. He had to maintain and develop it well. At the very least, he needed to strengthen the upper hive's security and maintain order, so chaos cultists or heretics wouldn't one day storm the royal court and take him out. Eden felt that something was off, but he couldn't pinpoint what it was. Was it the missing memories causing his discomfort? As he pondered, Eden felt the strange presence in the warp calling to him more strongly. At the same time, an overwhelming sense of exhaustion washed over him. It was clear he needed rest. Being mentally drained made one more vulnerable to chaos corruption. Eden turned and walked back into the bedroom, where the head maid, Linda, had already led the maids in tidying the room. These maids, all clad in black stockings, had been hand-picked and trained by the Grant family from a young age. Both their figures and appearances were top-notch. They stood in a neat line and bowed to Eden. "My lord, everything is ready for you to rest." "Good work." Eden nodded and waved them off, intending to let them leave. But to his surprise, the maids' eyes gleamed as they rushed forward, stripping him down and wiping his body with warm, soft towels. Is this part of the process too? Eden didn't quite understand, but he dared not resist, lest they notice something strange. Damn these otherworldly rulers. The maids looked at Eden with eyes full of longing, their hands roaming over his body, testing his resolve. The situation was almost out of control, but fortunately, Eden was no ordinary man. Having survived the palace of Slaanesh, this was nothing he couldn't handle. After they helped him into his pajamas, Eden finally breathed a sigh of relief. For some reason, he felt the maids were a bit too enthusiastic. Linda, the head maid, gazed at Eden, her heart racing and legs pressing together. "My lord, you seem different, so much more attractive." Eden's charm had indeed increased, a lingering side effect of being marked by Slaanesh. After following Slaanesh, a follower's personal charm would gradually grow, especially attracting those of the opposite sex. This was one of the lures Slaanesh used. However, as their faith deepened, Slaanesh's followers would slowly mutate, lost in their desires, until they became twisted abominations. But Eden had resisted the corruption and escaped, yet that increased charm had remained. With his current looks and allure, few women could resist him, and Linda was no exception. Noticing Linda staring at him, Eden was a bit taken aback. "What's wrong?" Under Eden's gaze, Linda pressed her legs together even tighter, her eyes moist with desire. "My lord, I always stayed with you at night, you said it helped you sleep better." "Is that so?" "Yes, you said you liked my scent, that holding me helped you fall asleep." Eden glanced at the head maid, Linda, with her sultry appearance and curvaceous figure, and couldn't help but swallow. "Sleep better? You've got to be kidding me. If you lie down next to me, who's going to be able to sleep?" Seeing Eden remain silent, Linda nervously clutched her chest, her face turning red. She glanced at the other maids. "If you feel it's not enough, you can have everyone join in." The maids nearby blushed and stared at Eden with wide, watery eyes. Is the governor's nightlife really this exciting? Eden Grant sure knew how to have fun. No wonder he ended up in Slaanesh's palace. But I'm not Eden Grant, I'm an honorable man. Besides, having just escaped Slaanesh's palace, there was no way Eden dared to mess around. Go, all of you, out," Eden ordered firmly. "Yes, my lord." Disappointed, Linda bowed deeply and turned to leave. A flash of white caught Eden's eye, and he took a sharp breath. As Linda walked away, Eden couldn't help but admire her soft figure wrapped in the maid uniform. "Slaanesh was right to pick me. At this rate, I'll have to return to that palace one day." As night deepened, Eden lay down and quickly fell into a deep sleep. Suddenly, his consciousness was forcefully pulled by something, and when he regained awareness, he found himself in the warp once again. Once more, he saw the massive, cold sun in the endless void. "This is strange, is the Emperor sending me a dream?" Chapter 5, The True Golden Finger, Warp Essence. "Your Majesty, Emperor." Eden attempted to call out, but the cold sun gave no response. After a while, he noticed something was off. "Where are my hands and feet? Where's my body?" He couldn't feel his body at all. Eden tried to expand his psychic sense to investigate and discovered a shocking truth. He had turned into a ball. To be precise, he had become a small sun made of psychic energy. At this moment, he was hidden beneath the radiance of the Emperor's great cold sun, slowly emitting warmth, bringing a faint glimmer of heat to the cold warp. A massive influx of psychic information flooded Eden's mind. After absorbing all of the information, he finally understood what the small sun was and took full control of it. This small sun-like psychic sphere was his warp essence, something that the powerful beings of the Warhammer universe desperately sought after. In simple terms, warp essence is the projection of a living being into the warp. In other words, what is the essence of your existence? Not everyone can possess such a thing. At the very least, one must be at the level of a primarch to awaken it. For example, after Corvus Corax, one of the Primarchs, awakened his warp essence, he became a warp shadow creature. He could transform into ravens and black clouds and had the ability to turn invisible. Once someone awakens their warp essence, their life form ascends to a higher level, becoming something akin to a god. Beyond that level is the Emperor himself, represented by the cold sun before Eden. The Emperor's light protects the entire Imperium of Man, enough to resist the four gods of chaos. Now, Eden had also awakened his warp essence, gaining access to the path of godhood. This was his true cheat. Eden's warp essence was named Dawn, but he preferred to call it the Little Sun. The Little Sun had saved Eden from Slaanesha's palace and granted him the power to become a psyker. This was enough to prove its immense strength. However, this had also caused the Little Sun to become extremely weak due to excessive energy consumption. Even the smallest warp storm could cause it to be snuffed out. Luckily, there was still a way to recover. Like the four chaos gods, Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Slaanesh, the Little Sun also fed on certain concepts or emotions as sustenance. But unlike the chaos gods, the Little Sun thrived on positive emotions. It fed on the concept of hope. Things like happiness, dreams, aspirations, courage, and passion could all restore the Little Sun's energy. Eden could split off a psychic core and anchor it in the real world, allowing the Little Sun to absorb hope-related concepts and emotions. As the planetary governor of Urth, Eden held dominion over an entire planet. As long as he developed the planet and improved the lives of his people, the Little Sun could continuously absorb the power of hope, restoring its strength and growing even more powerful. Once the Little Sun became strong again, it could in turn bless the planet, protecting its inhabitants, and granting them strength. This was Eden's true trump card. As long as he had enough time and continued to expand his territory, absorbing more and more hope, he could eventually ascend to godhood. Eden examined the Little Sun's abilities and found that many of its powers were currently locked. Abilities like blessings and teleportation required the energy to reach a certain level before they could be unlocked. Just as Eden was about to delve deeper into his study, another wave of psychic energy hit, kicking him out of the warp. Morning. At the top of the Royal Court District's tower. Warm sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows into the bedroom, where the maids waited nearby, ready for their master to awaken. Damn. Eden jolted awake and found himself back in the real world. Gathering his thoughts, he glanced at the clock. It was already 10 in the morning. Time flows strangely in the warp. I was only there for a short while, but so much time has passed in reality. Moreover, once again, it had been the psychic tide that had forcibly ejected him from the warp. It seemed his time spent in the warp was limited. Eden felt a little disappointed. He had just been about to explore the Little Sun's powers, only to be interrupted at the critical moment. It looked like he'd have to continue next time. Good morning. Linda, the head maid, greeted him softly as she handed him a warm towel to gently wipe his face. With the help of the maids, Eden washed up and got dressed, still somewhat drowsy as he made his way to the dining room. The breakfast table was already laden with a lavish spread. The golden utensils glistened under the crystal chandelier, and the plates were piled with an array of delicious dishes. Golden pancakes slathered with sweet arcaneberry jam, tender grox ham exuded an irresistible aroma, scrambled eggs dotted with rob fruits were as smooth as silk. The rich, aromatic scent of black coffee wafted into his nose, instantly perking him up. Eden came to his senses, looking at the luxurious breakfast before him and couldn't help but marvel. I'm lucky I transmigrated into Eden Grant and became the planetary governor, enjoying such a lavish lifestyle at the top of the hive. He could wake up naturally, be attended to by a group of beautiful maids, and then enjoy a sumptuous breakfast. No commuting, no rushing, no daily grind, and no annoying supervisors. A working man's tears. If Eden had transmigrated into the lower hive, he would probably already be toiling away in a factory, screwing bolts until his hands smoked, waiting for noon to eat a small block of corpse starch. Lunch breaks. Forget about it. Imperial workers had no rights. The conditions were 100 times worse than any grueling 996 work schedule. Many simply worked themselves to death. But the Imperium never worried about workers dying from exhaustion. There were always plenty of people to replace them. A single hive could support tens of billions of people. And as for ending up in the Underhive, Eden didn't even want to think about it. The people there lived amid horrifying pollution and terrifying mutants. They scavenged rotten food from trash heaps, and even breathing was considered a luxury. The people in the lower and Underhives certainly lived miserable lives, but at least now their planetary governor was Eden. Now that he possessed the little sun, a warp essence fueled by hope, Eden was destined to be a benevolent governor who cared for his people. He would make sure all of his citizens lived good lives. After all, their happiness and hope were Eden's sustenance. The better off they were, the more hope they would generate. This way, he could restore the little sun's energy and grow even stronger. Governor, is the food to your liking? Linda leaned over, offering Eden a bite. I made it with my own hands, you know. So soft, cough, it's delicious, delicious. Eden nodded hurriedly as he ate, though his attention was somewhat distracted by certain, jumping distractions. After finishing breakfast, Eden reclined in his chair, contemplating how best to manage his planet. At this point, he knew almost nothing about the state of Earth, and even Eden Grant hadn't been involved in the actual governance of the planet. The royal court employed hundreds of thousands of administrative personnel to manage the planet's complex affairs, but Eden had hardly met any of them. All of these matters had been handled by Bayev's administrative team. This was the way most planetary governors operated, otherwise, they would drown in the endless administrative work until they dropped dead from exhaustion. Eden only needed to make important decisions, and the stewards and bureaucrats would carry out his will and implement his ideas. Power and responsibility went hand in hand, inseparably linked. As a planetary governor, he wielded immense power. So, what were his responsibilities? What was his most important duty? Check out our playlist for more amazing novels. Continue. Chapter 6, The Imperial Tithe. What is the most important duty of a planetary governor? When asked this question, every planetary governor has only one standard answer. That is to pay taxes to the Imperium. The galaxy-spanning Imperium of Man is surrounded by countless enemies. The multi-front wars place immense pressure on the Imperium, resulting in an extremely strict taxation system. This system is known as the Imperial Tithe, also referred to as the Great Harvest Tax. It involves various resources that each world within the Imperium must provide. The two most important types of taxes are the military tithe, where the planet must provide a certain percentage of its population as labor for the Imperium's logistics or as new recruits. The precision tithe, which involves paying a precise amount of the planet's natural resources and wealth. The exact nature of the tithe depends on the type of world it applies to and can include any form of resource, food, weapons, minerals, or even people. Though the massive administratum on Holy Terra oversees the collection of the tithes, the sheer size of the Imperium and the instability of warp travel often make the process chaotic and inefficient. For Eden, the most important responsibility as planetary governor was to ensure that the tithes from Earth were paid in full. Once the tithes were paid, he could rule the planet however he wanted. Even if he turned the entire population into slaves and exploited them in the most extreme ways, piling up mountains of corpses, the Imperium would not intervene. Paying taxes on time was the greatest loyalty one could show to the Emperor. On the contrary, any world that refused to pay its tithes would face the harshest reprisals from the Imperium. If the resistance escalated, it could lead to an exterminatus. If any violations or shortfalls occurred in the tithe process, Imperial officials would order local arbits to immediately execute the planetary governor. The Imperium's rule was nothing if not a harsh and cold dictatorship. This meant that no matter how well Eden governed the planet, if there were problems with the taxes, he could lose his head. Chills ran down Eden's spine as he thought about it. This was terrifying. Linda noticed Eden's discomfort and softly asked, "Are you all right, my lord?" "I'm fine, just a bit cold, Before Eden could react, he found himself enveloped in Linda's warm and soft embrace. "Feeling better?" she asked gently. "Better, yes, just a bit hard to breathe. I need to get out of here." Eden stood up and began walking out. He needed to check the planet's tax records for the past few quarters. If there were any problems, they had to be dealt with immediately. If the arbits came knocking with bolt guns pointed at his head, it would be too late. This is a matter of life and death, there's no room for jokes. "Send for Steward Bayev to meet me at the administratum." Eden ordered, walking out of the dining hall. After taking a few steps, he turned back to Linda. By the way, where is the administratum again? Damn this memory fog, I can't even remember the way. After getting his bearings, Eden made his way to the administratum. Along the way, several administrative staff greeted him, though their looks were a bit strange. Eden couldn't help but feel that something was off. The administratum seemed different from what he remembered. Many departments were missing, and the place felt much emptier. Something must have happened. Eden thought about asking someone but decided against it. He'd figure it out later. For now, the priority is checking the taxes. The administratum archive. The entire archive was nearly 6 meters high and the size of several football fields, with thousands of shelves crammed with paper documents. Eden sat at a wooden table, flipping through a thick report, feeling utterly hopeless. Piles of documents surrounded him, stacked so high they could bury a person if they fell over. I'm losing it, this is just the tax records for this quarter. I'll never finish reading this in a year. What era is this? At least use a computer. Eden couldn't help but complain. After searching for a while, he confirmed that there was no connected technology in this place. Indeed, despite being in an era where interstellar travel was commonplace, the Imperium banned the use of intelligent devices, and artificial intelligence was strictly forbidden. Anyone daring to break this taboo and use AI would likely be declared a heretic and executed. Some might wonder, isn't the Imperium being absurd by banning this technology? You're young, still too young. It could be said that every strange regulation in the Imperium had a bloody lesson behind it. The Imperium banned internet-connected intelligent devices because of the threat of warp-dwelling data demons that could corrupt these systems, altering crucial data. During wartime, such corrupted data caused severe accidents that cost the Imperium dearly. Only the tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus were allowed to use technology on a small scale, as they could counteract these data demons with sacred codes and sigils. As for AI, it was banned entirely due to the horrors of the Men of Iron Rebellion, a catastrophe where intelligent machines nearly wiped out humanity. Though humanity ultimately won the war, ensuring the survival of the species, they now referred to AI as abominable intelligence and completely banned its use. But humanity wasn't left without alternatives. Eden glanced at a corner of the room, where a motionless figure stood, a servitor, its body full of wires and mechanical limbs. Servitors were the Imperium's replacement for AI, typically made from criminals or vat-grown bodies. After simple surgical modifications and brain programming, they became mindless robots, used for repetitive labor. For example, in this massive archive, the servitors handled the document-moving work, but any task requiring actual thought was still done by humans. The Imperium's vast bureaucracy was entirely run by human brains and relied on paper documents. Remember, the Imperium spanned the galaxy, ruling over millions of worlds. This led to the existence of a bloated administrative system with countless personnel. On Holy Terra alone, there were tens of billions of people, with a significant portion employed as bureaucrats, managing the affairs of millions of planets. Their inefficiency and disorganization were staggering. A single administrative order could take decades to reach a specific planet. By that time, the planet might have been invaded by chaos demons a century earlier, and its entire population wiped out. Even more absurdly, there were still departments within the Imperium calculating supplies for battles that had ended over 100 years ago, whether intentionally or by accident, no one could say. So, the fact that the Imperium hadn't collapsed yet was quite impressive. Jokes aside, survival in this system was tough. Sometimes, those bumbling bureaucrats made mistakes, like overestimating a planet's capacity or miscalculating the tithe data. And who paid for these mistakes? The planetary governors and their worlds. Every calculation error led to tragedy. Excessive tithes far beyond a planet's capacity could plunge tens or even hundreds of billions of people into extreme suffering. Even if the officials responsible were punished and turned into servitors, forced to atone for their sins for eternity, it was too late. By then, countless citizens would have already died in agony, and entire planets might become barren wastelands. Such was the brutal reality. Eden would have to first extract resources and population to pay the tithes, then consider how to develop the planet and improve the lives of its people to generate hope. But once all the resources and people were taken, how could he develop anything? And he couldn't simply refuse. If he did, the Arbits would send him to meet the Emperor and replace him with a new governor to continue collecting the tithes. Because taxes must be paid. If the Imperium couldn't collect its taxes, it would fall apart, and all of humanity would face an even crueler fate. Stuck in a catch-22. Being a planetary governor isn't easy, Eden sighed. It seemed that in the grim darkness of Warhammer 40k, generating the power of hope wouldn't be so simple. Surviving would be an achievement in itself. After searching for a while, Eden finally found the latest tax evaluation report for Urth. The moment he saw the report, his heart sank. By decree of the Administratum of Holy Terra, Urth's tax rating has been upgraded from second-class special to first-class supreme. Chapter 7. The Brutal Tax System. The Imperium's taxation system is divided into 4 tiers and 16 levels. Apart from the 4th tier, which grants special tax exemptions and only has 1 level, the other 3 tiers have 5 sub-levels: elementary, intermediate, superior, advanced, and elite. The tax levels from the 1st to the 3rd tier correspond to different world classifications. For example, civilized worlds, agri worlds, hive worlds, feral worlds, and even low-tier death worlds. Forge worlds, shrine worlds, and certain worlds granted special exemption don't have to pay taxes. Urth is a mineral-rich world, but in terms of development, it barely qualifies as a low-tier hive world, fitting within the 2nd-tier elite tax level. However, the Administratum had now elevated Urth's tax classification to 1st-tier superior, a sudden leap of 3 levels, which was simply outrageous. This meant that Urth would need to send countless citizens to work night and day mining every last resource from the planet. Blood would flow, and people would perish, yet they'd barely scrape together enough to meet the tax demands. The Imperial tithe also included human resources. For a 1st-tier superior tax classification, the population tithe would be immense. Eden would be required to give up at least 1/10 of the planet's population. With such a heavy tax burden, even if the planet didn't collapse immediately, it wouldn't be long before Earth's civilization would be on the brink of extinction. And that was assuming the tax could even be collected successfully. More likely, rebels would storm the palace, beheading Eden, the planetary governor. But even killing him wouldn't change anything. The taxes would still have to be paid, and the people of Urth wouldn't escape their grim fate. Unless he could somehow convince the Administratum on Holy Terra to reassess and lower the tax rate. This is just pushing people to their deaths. Looking around at the servitors endlessly working in the archive, Eden felt a chill run down his spine. There's no way we can pay these taxes. Eden pressed the call button on the desk, and soon, the elderly administrator, Old Mike, walked over, bowing respectfully. Governor, what can I do for you? Send a formal petition to the Administratum on Holy Terra. Inform them that Urth cannot bear such an exorbitant tithe and urgently requests a reassessment of the tax rate. Huh, you want to send a letter to Holy Terra? That's impossible, the Emperor above, it can't be done. Old Mike muttered nervously, his mind seeming a bit unhinged. What's going on? We can't contact Holy Terra. Suppressing his anxiety, Eden softened his tone to seem as calm as possible. Could you explain why we can't send a message to Holy Terra? Old Mike looked terrified. Because the Emperor has abandoned us. We are sinners. This is the Emperor's forsaken land, he has abandoned his flock. The chaos monsters will kill us all. Seeing Old Mike grow more frantic and deranged, Eden nearly reached for his gun. Is this old man a heretic? If what Old Mike was saying was true, Urth might be in serious trouble. Old Mike, stop spouting nonsense. Bayev entered the room, sharply rebuking Old Mike. Old Mike immediately quieted down, bowing his head to Bayev. Steward. Bayev patted Old Mike on the shoulder, speaking gently. Go take a rest, I'll handle the governor's instructions. Oh, all right. Old Mike left the room, shoulders slumped in defeat. Bayev, watching him leave, turned to Eden and explained, Old Mike lost his mind a few years ago and has been talking nonsense ever since. So, he's just a madman, Eden thought with relief. For a moment, he really believed Urth had lost contact with Holy Terra, which would have been a massive problem. If it were a chaos incursion, it would have spelled disaster. Spreading heretical rumors should have resulted in punishment, but he's served the family for over a century and once took a blade for the Grant bloodline. He's earned his keep. Bayev continued, so, we let him handle the archives, where he only has to deal with servitors. A few ramblings don't hurt anyone here. The Grant family seems quite compassionate, Eden thought, having no memories of old Mike. He nodded in agreement. Bayev then turned to Eden and asked, what did you need old Mike to do? Frowning, Eden responded, I wanted to file a petition to Holy Terra. Urth cannot bear the Imperium's tax burden. In truth, Eden had little hope the petition would succeed. It was merely a gamble. After all, requesting a change in tax status would imply the administratum had made a mistake, which would require someone to take responsibility. Getting an imperial official to admit fault was nearly impossible. They could simply ignore the request or endlessly delay the approval process. With bureaucratic red tape spanning decades or even centuries, many mistakes were never held accountable. By the time Earth's resources were depleted or rebellion broke out, it would be too late. The planet would be wiped out naturally. The Imperium ruled over millions of planets, and its territory was constantly expanding. At every moment, worlds perished for one reason or another. By the time news of Urth reached Holy Terra, who knew how many years would have passed? Urth was just a lowly hive world, and if it were to be destroyed, the suffering and death of its billions of people would amount to little more than a footnote in the administratum's records. That record would likely be sealed away in some dusty file, never to be opened again. At that moment, Eden realized the weight of his position. The decisions he made could affect the fate of billions on this planet. The pressure was suffocating. What should I do? Governor, there's no need to file a petition, Bayev said confidently. We have to try something, Eden replied anxiously. At this rate, we won't even make this quarter's tax payment. Taxes. Bayev looked at Eden in surprise. You're referring to the tithe. Is there a problem? Have you forgotten something? Bayev's heart raced. Ever since yesterday, the governor had been acting strange, almost as if he were a different person. Seeing Bayev's reaction, Eden realized it must be a memory lapse causing him to act out of character. What exactly was he missing? He hesitated, debating whether to reveal part of the truth to ease Bayev's concerns. If they could openly communicate, it might help prevent any major errors caused by this memory fog. Governor. Bayev looked at Eden with concern, fearing that something was seriously wrong with the last of the Grant bloodline. Eden snapped out of his thoughts and decided to be somewhat honest. It wouldn't help to keep dragging this out. I have forgotten a few things, Eden said, pointing to his head. It's probably a side effect of my psychic awakening. Awakening as a psyker was incredibly dangerous. It meant communication with the warp, often leading to terrible consequences. These consequences could range from psychic instability, resulting in violent outbursts, to outright corruption into a monstrous entity. Losing a few memories was actually a fortunate outcome. Memory loss. Bayev scrutinized Eden nervously. After a long pause, he finally relaxed and suggested, this is no small matter. We should ask Bishop Donnie to take a look at you. No problem, Eden nodded, steering the conversation back to the main issue. But for now, let's focus on the taxes. What's going on? Bayev dropped a bombshell. Actually, you don't need to worry about the taxes anymore. We're no longer required to pay them. What? Chapter 8. Bad news, we've lost contact with the Imperium. Why? Do we now have the 4th-tier tax exemption? Eden couldn't believe it. Only planets or regimes that had made significant contributions to the Imperium were granted tax exemptions. Earth was just a low-tier hive world, how could it qualify for a tax exemption? By the Emperor's grace, it seems you've truly forgotten a lot, Bayev said, his expression heavy. This all started 5 years ago. He pointed to the evaluation report on the desk. 5 years ago, the administratum of Holy Terra raised Earth's tax classification. As Bayev continued to explain, Eden finally learned what had happened back then. It was the story of Eden's father, the previous planetary governor of Urth. Urth was a typical mining planet, with a highly developed mining industry. Under Governor Grant's rule, mineral resources were being extracted in an orderly manner. After paying the imperial tithe, there was still a surplus. Compared to other planetary governors who were extravagant, violent, or incompetent, Grant was at least somewhat benevolent, he cared about his people's lives. Under his leadership, the planet prospered. The citizens of Earth didn't have to work themselves to death in the mines, nor did they worry about starvation. Occasionally, they could even enjoy bread mixed with sawdust. In this harsh universe, that was practically a life of luxury. This peace lasted until officials from the Administratum of Holy Terra arrived. They evaluated Earth and determined the planet had more tax potential than previously realized. They miscalculated Earth's capacity and abruptly raised its tax classification by 3 levels. Governor Grant desperately filed appeals, but they vanished into the void without any response. As the tax deadline loomed, after repeated warnings, Grant had no choice but to order an all-out effort to extract resources. However, the reckless mining caused massive environmental damage, frequent mining accidents, and the deaths of millions of citizens. Wasn't there another way? Even though Eden knew the outcome, he couldn't help but ask. Are you suggesting rebellion? Bayev shook his head. That would be unwise and pointless. Rebellion is treason against the Imperium. Earth would become a battleground, and the people would shed their last drop of blood in their homeland. No one can defy the Emperor's orders. The Imperium has thousands of massive fleets, trillions of soldiers, and the powerful space marines. A single fleet or even a small squad of space marines could easily destroy Earth. Failing to pay the tithe carries grave consequences. The tithe is a sign of loyalty to the Emperor, the greatest obligation of every Imperial citizen. It applies to everyone, no one can refuse it. Bayev sighed. Your father understood this all too well, but his heart wasn't ruthless enough. As a result, he failed to gather enough resources, and the tithe was delayed. Your father begged the Administratum for more time, but those damned officials only cared about taxes. They paid no heed to Earth's suffering. They believed Earth was resisting the tithe and sent in a team from the Adeptus Arbits to investigate. Eden felt his heart tighten. The involvement of the Arbits meant things had escalated. What was the result of the investigation? The Arbits team was attacked by Chaos heretics. The Arbiter himself was lightly injured, but one female investigator was killed. It was an accident. Eden sighed. Investigators were attacked the moment they arrived. Who would believe that was an accident? Bayev seemed to understand Eden's thoughts and continued, as you suspected, the Arbiter didn't believe it was an accident. He was furious and reported the matter to the Inquisition, claiming that Chaos had corrupted Earth and that a full-scale purge was needed. What a fool. The Arbiter must have lost his mind to involve the Inquisition. The Inquisition, formed during the Horus Heresy, was the most powerful secret agency of the Imperium, tasked with identifying and eliminating all threats to the Imperium and humanity. The Inquisition had vast authority, with no formal hierarchy or centralized leadership, answering only to the Emperor. This meant inquisitors were free to act as they saw fit to safeguard the Imperium's survival. Unrestrained by oversight, inquisitors often became fanatical and ruthless, sometimes even turning on their own. As Eden expected, the Arbiter's luck ran out when he encountered an inquisitor with a short temper. The inquisitor's important ritual had been interrupted, and he came to Earth in a rage. Upon arrival, his first order of business was to investigate the Arbiter. When incriminating evidence was found, he executed the Arbiter on the spot for accepting bribes and abusing his power. Afterward, the Inquisitor conducted an investigation on Earth and found no issues. It truly was just an accident. Governor Grant thought the matter would end there, but the Inquisitor believed that paying the tithe was a sacred duty and the foundation of the Imperium. No planet, regardless of the reason, could evade its taxes. If every planet followed Earth's example, the Imperium's foundation would crumble, risking collapse. Thus, Earth had to fulfill its obligation, not only paying the overdue taxes but also a hefty fine. Governor Grant begged the Inquisitor to consider the people of Earth, as they couldn't bear such a heavy burden. Life is the Emperor's currency, sacrifice is the foundation of the Imperium. The nearly fanatical Inquisitor declared. And so, under the supervision of the Inquisitor, Earth endured a brutal tax collection process. Anyone who resisted was executed. Billions of people worked day and night, tens of billions died in the mines, and countless others were conscripted into the Astra Militarum to fight on the front lines against Xenos. By the end of the process, Earth had lost half its population, and the planet's surface was ravaged, littered with deadly pollution. After such sacrifices, the people of Urth finally gathered the taxes demanded by the Inquisitor. Bayev's eyes filled with tears as he spoke. Those taxes were paid with Urth's blood and tears. When the Inquisitor left, Governor Grant begged him to appeal to the Administratum. He explained that Urth couldn't bear such heavy taxes. He hoped the Inquisitor would report Urth's true situation to Holy Terra, so they could reassess the tax classification and lower it. Did he agree? Bayev's eyes turned red as he spoke. He chopped off Governor Grant's head, splattering us all with blood. He declared that Governor Grant was a heretic, claiming he smelled the stench of chaos. But Governor Grant was so kind, how could he have been a heretic? Eden clenched his fists. What was that Inquisitor's name? It doesn't matter, he's dead. What? Eden was stunned. Inquisitors were powerful enough to battle chaos, Xenos, and any potential threat, even capable of taking on chaos demons. How could one have died so easily? Bayev answered Eden's unspoken question. It wasn't us who killed him, it was a warp storm. The Inquisitor's ship had suffered an accident after entering the warp. A massive warp storm tore apart the ship, scattering debris and dismembered bodies, which were ejected from the warp and landed on Urth. Half of the Inquisitor's body was gone, but he was still alive. He ordered us to save him. Bayev's voice turned cold. We could have saved him, but no one moved. We just stood there. We watched as he lowered his head, begging us for help. We watched as he slowly despaired and started cursing our heresy. Everyone stood there and watched him struggle on the ground until he died. Eden sighed deeply and patted Bayev on the shoulder. Maybe old Mike wasn't wrong. Bayev wiped his tears. We desecrated the Emperor. We've been forsaken. Why? Eden asked, confused. That mysterious warp storm destroyed the root, and the planet's only astropath died. We've been cut off from Holy Terra ever since. Astropaths were vital intermediaries for Imperial worlds to communicate with Holy Terra, and normally, warp storms didn't affect them. A warp storm strong enough to kill an astropath. Eden jumped up. Could it be the Great Rift? Chapter 9, Has the Hive Fallen? Remember to leave a review. Thanks for your support. Eden finally understood which point in time he was in, the end of the 41st millennium. The Great Rift. This was the greatest crisis the Imperium had faced since Warmaster Horus' heresy. A massive warp storm had torn reality apart, creating the Great Rift. The chaotic energies unleashed by this rift caused one astronomicon after another to extinguish, leaving no protection for the Imperium. The moment the astronomicon lights went out, disaster struck. Countless ships were torn apart in the void, and innumerable worlds were left exposed, isolated, and consumed by the darkness. Chaos rampaged, and planets fell. Cries for help, screams of despair, and final pleas flooded the minds of astropaths, overwhelming them. The overwhelming torrent of information drove the astropaths insane, some even to death. The Imperium was crippled, and the end of days spread. Enemies from the darkness launched attacks on the Imperium. From the distant borders of the Pacificus sector to the storm-ravaged Chiratan sector, worlds were being destroyed, and trillions of Imperial citizens died in despair. By the time the Astronomicon was reignited, the massive rift had fully formed, dividing the Imperium into two. Half of the Imperium's domain was shrouded in darkness. Those worlds trapped in darkness were referred to as the Imperium Nihilus. They had lost contact with Holy Terra, were unable to request aid from the Imperium, and were left to struggle on their own or perish in the void. But all hope wasn't lost for these worlds. If they could hold out long enough for Lord Commander Rabute Gilliman and his Indomitus Crusade to arrive, they would have a chance to return to the light. If Eden wasn't mistaken, Urth was currently situated within the Imperium Nihilus. Without the protection of the Emperor or the Imperial forces, Urth was as vulnerable as a lamb, in extreme danger. The planetary defense forces of Urth were virtually useless. They might be able to suppress internal rebellions, but to fight Xenos or chaos, they would just be scrubs, cannon fodder among cannon fodder. If Xenos or chaos launched a significant invasion, Urth's only fate would be annihilation. However, Eden found some relief in the fact that Urth had lost contact with the Imperium. This meant that Urth no longer had to bear the burden of the oppressive Imperial tithe, effectively giving it a chance to survive. And as the highest ruler of the planet, Eden could act as he pleased without any interference from the Imperium. With his little son, as long as he had enough time and a proper strategy, he was confident he could protect the planet. Of course, that was only if they weren't unlucky enough to catch the attention of a large force of Xenos or Chaos. In that case, it would be game over. What great rift? Bayev seemed confused. Nothing, Eden shook his head. He didn't want to reveal this matter to anyone. It was hard to explain and far too terrifying, it would only incite more fear. Eden's mood lightened a bit, and he tossed the documents aside. There was no need to keep reading. What was the point of paying taxes if they weren't even connected to the Imperium anymore? Make arrangements. I want to inspect the lower hive, Eden ordered. He planned to place the psychic core of the little sun in the lower hive to link it to the real world and start absorbing hope energy. Here, it's worth mentioning the structure of a hive city. A hive city is a massive metallic structure that spans continents, housing tens or even hundreds of billions of residents. Hive cities are typically divided into 4 layers: the underhive, lower hive, upper hive, and the spire. The underhive is located at the very bottom, riddled with pollution, reactors, and decaying structures. Mutants roam freely, making it virtually uninhabitable. It's a haven for the poorest, the dregs of society, and various criminals, outcasts, and mutants. No sane person would willingly enter the underhive, so it exists beyond the reach of planetary governance, where only violence and death reign. The lower hive, located above the underhive, is the industrial zone. Various industrial sectors are established here, housing tens of billions of workers, making up the majority of the hive's population. The workers in the lower hive toil day and night, producing food, electricity, and basic supplies to barely sustain themselves. The upper hive is where the nobles and officials reside, enjoying free electricity and the resources provided by the lower hive. As for the spire, it's the domain of the planetary governor, who controls everything on the planet. In Eden's view, placing the psychic core in the lower hive offered the best return on investment. Workers were the easiest to generate hope from, just slightly improving their living conditions could yield a massive amount of hope energy. With confidence surging, Eden believed he had a stellar starting hand. He was ready to lead Earth to success with his little son. Unfortunately, reality was cruel. Bayev shook his head. You can't go, the lower hive has fallen. Eden. Through Bayev's explanation, Eden learned that after his father's death, many things had happened. When Eden inherited the title of governor, the negative effects of the warp storm continued to plague the planet, causing mutants to surge from the underhive. A large portion of the planetary defense forces had been dispatched to the underhive to suppress the mutants, leaving the spire in a state of extreme vulnerability. Before long, a faction of nobles, allied with the heretics in the lower hive, rebelled and took control of the entire lower hive. They organized forces and launched an assault on the upper hive, nearly taking the spire itself. Countless lives were lost in the upper hive, with many nobles and officials being slaughtered. It was only after immense sacrifice that Eden's father finally drove the rebels out of the upper hive and sealed off the gates and elevator shafts, completely isolating the upper hive from the lower and underhive. The spire's defenses were devastated, leaving the upper hive without the strength to reclaim lost ground, and Eden's father fell into despair, drowning in alcohol and debauchery. Until he was dragged into Slaanesha's palace and died, only to be replaced by the soul-transferred Eden. Now, Eden, as the planetary governor, was confined to the upper hive and could barely even control that. What a disaster. The perfect start had been ruined. How was he supposed to improve things now? Eden had planned to win over the workers in the lower hive by improving their lives, gaining their loyalty, and harvesting hope energy from their positive emotions. Now, the only source of hope energy left was in the upper hive and the spire. But that area was full of nobles and officials. How was he supposed to win their favor? These people already lived privileged lives. It would be nearly impossible to gain their loyalty. Even if Eden offered them more, they would likely never show him gratitude or loyalty. He should consider himself lucky if they weren't plotting to overthrow him with their private armies and seize control of the spire. Upper hive nobles had a tradition of scheming against one another and even resorting to murder. This stemmed from one simple rule: the Imperium didn't care about internal planetary power struggles. As long as the imperial tithe was paid, whoever ruled the planet was irrelevant. This meant that anyone who managed to kill Eden and establish their own rule would inherit the planet's supreme authority. Now that Eden was so weak, weren't those noble houses plotting day and night on how to kill him and take his place? After barely surviving, was fate throwing another impossible challenge his way? Eden felt drained and slumped back into his chair. What's wrong? Eden weakly asked. How much territory do we still control? How many troops and citizens do we have left? Chapter 10. Inspecting the territory. Bayev, as Eden's senior steward, was naturally well informed on the situation. He detailed the areas currently under control, the state of the army, population, and the status of enemy factions. Aside from the spire where the palace was located, Eden controlled about 1/3 of the upper hive and commanded a planetary defense force of over 50,000 troops. The rest of the upper hive was dominated by the Hoffman family and various warbands, the most notable being the Grey Wolf warband. In the aftermath of the rebellion, the upper hive had become chaotic, reflecting the turmoil across the entire hive city. Once vassals of the Grant family, the Hoffman family had made their ambitions clear. The assassination attempt last night was almost certainly orchestrated by them. Their power was growing day by day, and it was only a matter of time before they launched a full-scale assault. Bad news came one after another. However, there was some good news as well. The rebellion had caused millions of refugees to flood into the upper hive, where they remained. Eden now controlled nearly 2 million people. This gave him a solid population base to work with. If he managed them well, he could generate enough hope energy to restore part of Little Sun's capabilities. With time, reclaiming the lower hive was no longer just a dream. Forget the lower hive for now, let's start with inspecting the areas we control in the upper hive, Eden decided. For the love of the Emperor, that's too dangerous, Bayev protested, clearly worried. You should stay in the palace. Assassins from the Hoffman family have been waiting for an opportunity. If something happens to you, the entire Grant family will be finished. Eden wasn't convinced. He looked at Bayev. You can protect me, right? If his own people couldn't protect him within their own territory, they were practically useless. He might as well lay his neck bare and wait for someone to cut it. Besides, as a psyker, Eden wasn't without the means to defend himself. In a world where strength ruled, cowardice was a fatal flaw. Eden was cautious, but he wasn't a coward. As the planetary governor and ruler of Urth, if he stayed hidden in the palace, avoiding his people and failing to make promises, he would lose their trust and respect as the situation worsened. If that continued, his power would crumble, and his rule would fail. All that awaited Eden then was death. My lord, we can protect you. Bayev straightened up, speaking with conviction. The assassination attempt the previous night had deeply shamed Bayev. That he had allowed the bloodline of the Grant family to be placed in such danger was unforgivable. He swore with his life that he would never let the governor be harmed again. Good. Eden's tone left no room for doubt. It's decided then. After making arrangements, Eden followed Bayev out of the palace. Escorted by Carter and his squad of elite guards, they boarded a hovercar and drove out of the spire. It was only then that Eden truly saw the state of the palace district. Everywhere were the scars of war, with craters and wreckage scattered about. Luxurious buildings and finely crafted statues, many over 1,000 years old, were now broken and dilapidated. Given such a catastrophe, the palace district had barely held itself together. There was no capacity to make repairs. As the hovercar passed through the sacred square, Eden looked up at the massive 100-meter statue of the emperor, feeling awe. Unfortunately, the emperor's statue had also been damaged. The nose had been blown off by some heretic, one arm was missing, and rubble littered the base. Beyond the palace district, the scene became crowded and filthy. The upper hive, once a haven for nobles and officials, had been sparsely populated, with most of its space dedicated to residential areas, entertainment streets, and gardens. There was hardly any industry. After the rebellion, the upper hive lost its supply of resources from the lower hive, leading to extreme shortages. As a result, the upper hive had been drastically transformed, with makeshift industrial zones and mushroom farms hastily established, and corpse starch production lines activated. Refugees were organized into labor, working in various factories, mines, and farms. Even so, the upper hive couldn't support so many people. Resources were rapidly depleting, and food was growing scarcer by the day. More and more people couldn't even afford their daily ration of corpse starch, and were starving to death. Countless people were born into filth, toiled in agony, and died in the streets, with no one to sing their praises or mourn their passing. Such was their fate. As Eden sat in the hovercar, watching the people on the streets collapse from hunger, he felt a deep sadness for them. "How many people die here every day?" Eden asked. "People die every day, it's hard to keep track," Bayev shook his head. "Honestly, the citizens here have it relatively good. If they were under the Hoffman family or the warbands, they'd be suffering a fate worse than death." Eden remained silent, noticing the way the people on the streets looked at him: confusion, apathy, fear, and even hatred. The situation was worse than he had imagined. Winning the people's support would be nearly impossible now. He'd be lucky if a major rebellion didn't break out. Not far away, an elderly woman collapsed and died on the ground, her body eyed hungrily by onlookers. But they were quickly dispersed as armed corpse collectors arrived to drag the body away. Bayev noticed Eden's puzzled expression and explained, "All resources are incredibly precious here. Nothing can go to waste." Eden suddenly realized what was happening. The bodies weren't being taken for burial or incineration, they were being sent to special machines to be broken down into proteins, to be turned into corpse starch and sustain more lives. It was brutal, but necessary. Eden quietly resolved that he had to change this, but there was so little he could do right now. The warehouses were running out of food, and soon the palace district wouldn't even be able to support the army. Rumor had it that conditions in the territories controlled by the Hoffman family and the Grey Wolf warband were even worse, with food supplies completely exhausted. To maintain control, they had started slaughtering those who were too weak or unfit to work, turning them into corpse starch to feed their armies. They, too, had millions of people, and could hold out for quite some time. The upper hive was now a sealed-off cauldron, where only the most ruthless and poisonous would survive. But Eden refused to claim victory through such cruel means. He had to find another way. Perhaps the little sun in the warp could help him break this deadlock. As nightfall approached, Eden had seen enough suffering and couldn't bear to look any longer. "Let's head back," he said, closing his eyes and instructing Bayev to take him home. By the time they returned to the spire, the maids had already prepared dinner. Eden sat in the luxurious dining room, looking at the sumptuous meal laid before him, but he had little appetite. The situation was dire, he had to find a way to break through. Chapter 11, The Derelict Spaceship. Eden quickly finished his dinner and returned to his bedroom to rest. The maids helped him wash up and change into nightwear. Eden lay down on the soft bed. "You can all leave now. I'm going to sleep." "As you wish, Governor," the maids said, bowing gracefully before tiptoeing out of the room. The crystal lamps dimmed as they left. As night deepened, soft red moonlight filtered through the windows, casting a faint glow across the room. "I still can't get used to that red moon," Eden mumbled, his eyes open. After seeing the familiar moon of his home world, the red moon here seemed especially eerie. But he wasn't having trouble sleeping, there was something more important he needed to do. Eden activated his psychic power, focusing on the whispering voices coming from the warp. He intended to replicate the events of the previous night, to re-enter the warp and seek out Little Sun. This was extremely dangerous, as it exposed him to the corrupting influences of the warp and its terrifying entities. But Eden had no choice. He needed to study and harness the power of Little Sun to find a solution to the current crisis. After all, this was his greatest trump card. The whispers in the warp grew sharper, with many strange beings calling out to him. The tugging sensation became more intense. "Which one is it?" Eden gritted his teeth, enduring the splitting headache as he tried to identify Little Sun's specific signal among the chaos. Among the many presences, one stood out, a powerful purple force that constantly tempted him. It seemed that if he answered, he would be transported to a place of unparalleled pleasure. An old acquaintance, Eden thought, realizing that the call came from Slanesh, the chaos god of excess and pleasure, who was still trying to lure him in. "Ha! You won't tempt me." Eden dismissed the frequency from Slanesh and blocked it out, muttering, "Get lost." Slanesh's reaction was immediate and furious, continuing to bombard him with calls to join its realm. But Eden completely ignored it. Communicating with the warp was like chatting online. It didn't matter how angry the other party got, there was little they could actually do. Slaanesh wouldn't send a demon to get me, right? Eden suddenly grew nervous. If Slaanesh tracked him down and sent a demon to capture him in the real world, he would be doomed. There are hundreds of millions of planets in the Imperium, no way they'd find me that easily, Eden reassured himself. If it were that easy for Slaanesh to pluck people from the warp, the Imperium's key figures would have been long dead. Moreover, Little Sun was still protecting him, making it difficult for Slaanesh to locate him. Comforted by this thought, Eden continued his search for Little Sun's signal. Just as he was about to lose his grip, a familiar frequency entered his mind. It was Little Sun. Eden immediately latched onto the signal with his psychic awareness, responding to its call. Boom! In an instant, Eden's consciousness was pulled into the warp. He was back. Once again, his consciousness merged with Little Sun. He gazed at the cold, shining sun formed by the Emperor's will, suspended high above in the void, feeling a slight sense of relief. Thankfully, the Emperor's protection kept his Little Sun avatar safe from the predatory creatures of the warp, which would have devoured it as a snack otherwise. Eden began to guide Little Sun, trying to get a feel for its power. But the energy shortage still left many of its abilities unusable, such as illusion projection, blessings, and teleportation. For now, the only ability Eden could use was warp exploration, and he only had enough energy for one attempt. Simply put, this meant he could open a treasure chest in the warp and search for physical objects. Some might consider this a useless ability, but Eden knew it had immense potential. After all, there were countless treasures scattered throughout the warp, especially derelict ships. Since humanity first mastered warp travel, ships had been entering the warp for millennia. During the height of human technology in the Golden Age, countless ships traveled through the warp. But the warp was dangerous, like a stormy sea, and its deadly warp storms could destroy everything. Over the centuries, countless ships had been lost in the warp, their wrecks floating aimlessly through the void. These wrecks were treasure troves, potentially containing lost technology, powerful weapons, and ancient relics. With technology having regressed so much in the present day, finding a relic from the Golden Age, such as an STC standard template construct, would be like striking gold. Should I search? Eden decided to activate Little Sun's search ability, sending out a psychic scan through the warp. As a self-proclaimed unlucky person, he performed a small superstitious ritual, crossing his fingers as he initiated the search. Search initiated. Little Sun trembled slightly, and a wave of psychic light spread out, rippling through the endless void. Soon, the energy began to pinpoint various objects, marking them as glowing dots on Eden's mental map. Each dot represented a physical object within the warp. Eden was nervous, he could only place one psychic beacon to navigate toward an object. The choice was crucial. If he selected something unreachable or, worse, picked a Chaos God's lair, he was doomed. It felt like playing a game where you only had one chance to draw a card, extremely nerve-wracking. Please let it be something good. Eden mentally rubbed his hands together and selected a medium-sized glowing dot. After all, a massive dot could be a dangerous lair belonging to a powerful entity, so it was safer to pick something moderate. Once he made his choice, Eden guided his consciousness to dive toward it. His awareness stretched into the void, slipping through a warp rift and emerging in a new location moments later. As his vision cleared, Eden saw an ancient metal colossus looming ahead, colliding with his senses like a mountain. Compared to this massive metal object, he was as small as an ant standing before a giant beast, the sheer scale overwhelming. Eden extended his psychic senses and realized that the structure was a derelict ship, glowing faintly blue as it drifted through the warp. A derelict ship. I've hit the jackpot, Eden exclaimed. When a ship was wrecked in the warp, its remains often drifted for centuries. Sometimes, these wrecks were drawn into warp vortexes, gathering into massive debris fields. Through some mysterious force, the wreckage within these debris fields would fuse together, forming an enormous structure that continued its eternal voyage through the warp. These ghost ships were often called derelict spaceships, moving treasure troves in the warp. The interior of such a ship often contained remnants from multiple eras, including lost technology or sacred relics, just waiting for a fateful explorer to find them. However, exploring a derelict spaceship was highly dangerous, as heretics or even chaos demons often made these wrecks their nests. I really hope this ship hasn't been taken over by a chaos demon. Eden felt a pang of worry. If the ship was occupied by a powerful demon, he stood no chance of exploring it. Chapter 12. Investigation. The treasure was right in front of him. If the chaos demons took over, how heartbreaking would that be? Eden felt a pang in his heart as he activated his psychic senses to scan the entire space hulk. This was his advantage. Controlling the miniature sun, he possessed godlike power. He was lucky that this space hulk had not been occupied by some terrible entity. Within the space hulk, there were only some chaos creatures, scattered void remnants, and a small group of relatively threatening chaos pirates. Fortunately, this space hulk was enormous, almost half the size of the moon. If he were cautious, he could avoid them for a lifetime. This meant that Eden could explore the treasure without taking too much risk. Eden carefully controlled his psychic sense, exploring the space hulk bit by bit, searching for an STC or ancient relic that could be used to create powerful weapons. That way, he could quickly improve his combat power, break out of the Hive City, and reclaim the entire Hive world. Once the Hive world was recovered, food, energy, and population would all be his, a dream start. As his psychic sense continued exploring, Eden saw a village of void remnants hidden within a mountain of wreckage. These remnants were tall, dressed simply, and fed on the fungal colonies in the wreckage. The remnants formed small teams to gather fungi from the outer wreckage, but their luck was bad. They encountered a group of chaos creatures. What a pity. Eden thought these people were doomed. Facing such a large number of chaos creatures, even an elite squad of the Astra Militarum would struggle to cope. But the void remnants surprised him. Their bodies were incredibly strong, wielding thick alloy spears, facing the oncoming chaos creatures head-on. In no time, they had dealt with all the chaos creatures. Even though the warriors were wounded, they were still lively and energetic. They happily carried the corpses of the chaos creatures back, seemingly preparing for some sort of ritual. These were born warriors. If there was a chance to recruit them, how wonderful that would be. The problem was that Eden was currently just a psychic consciousness, almost unable to communicate directly with these people. He marked the village, planning to return here once he had the power to recruit these void remnant warriors. For now, even if Eden could teleport his physical body here, he wouldn't last long. Chaos creatures would tear him apart immediately. Eden's psychic sense moved past the remnant village, continuing to search for places that might hold lost technology, but unfortunately, most of those areas were occupied by chaos creatures. Later, he found a more intact section of the ship, which seemed to be a residential area of a giant vessel, containing many valuable technologies. This section had become a chaos pirate hideout. The chaos pirates were filthy and mutated to varying degrees, with many sprouting void fungi from their bodies. They used wet tentacles to grasp bottles of alcohol, drinking and spilling as they cursed and ranted. Beasts, come drink the finest amasec. Idiot, Guntrit's brew is the best. You moron, do you want to die? The chaos pirates quickly started fighting, and soon, one side lay in a bloody heap, unable to move. Their minds had been corrupted by the warp. They were more beasts wearing human skin than actual humans. In the pirates' hangar, ships landed and took off. Chaos pirates staggered as they dragged their loot off the ships, joining the ongoing revelry. Eden even saw one chaos pirate carrying a silent sister down from the ship, though it was unclear which unfortunate Imperial ship had been raided. Eden approached cautiously. After all, knowing one's enemy was crucial. Eventually, he would have to face these people. Such a great treasure trove should be his alone to enjoy. Leaving it to these drunken, thieving chaos pirates would be a complete waste. Who's there? Just as he got closer, he was noticed. It was a red-haired female pirate leader, with fair skin and a voluptuous figure, surprisingly without any mutations. The red-haired pirate sat on a throne in the wreckage hall, gazing in Eden's direction where his psychic presence was. No way, she sensed me. Eden froze for a moment. Zap! The red-haired pirate raised a melta-gun and fired in his direction. Ha! Good thing I'm in a psychic state, with no physical body, Eden thought, relieved. Since this fiery pirate couldn't harm him, he could stay and investigate the situation further. I found you. Show yourself. The red-haired pirate seemed unwilling to give up. She floated into the air, her eyes glowing red as if she were searching for something. A Gamma-level psyker. A strong sense of danger surged within Eden. He had only one thought: run. He quickly withdrew his psychic presence, moving through layers of metal wreckage, distancing himself from the ship section. The red-haired pirate didn't find anyone and reclined back into her throne, resting her chin on her hand, looking bored. Sigh, I thought something interesting was going to happen. Her name was Kalina, one of the Empire's most wanted criminals, charged with desecrating the God Emperor and betraying the Imperium. TCH, Kalina was still indignant. All she had done was kill a few of the Empire's dogs on Holy Terra. Did that really warrant the High Lords ordering her death? They even sent squads of Space Marines and several Inquisitors. Luckily, she had escaped in time, otherwise, she'd be dead by now. To avoid the hunt, she had been hiding in this cursed place for a long time. How long? Sorry, in the warp, there was no concept of time or space, only endless chaos. I wish a handsome man would just drop from the sky for me to play with. Kalina sighed, her ample chest heaving. She glanced at the ugly chaos pirates still brawling, growing even more agitated. Boom! A shockwave exploded among the crowd, scattering the chaos pirates in all directions. Shut up. Get lost. Kalina shouted in anger, unleashing a powerful psychic force. The chaos pirates scrambled to their feet, bowing in submission to their queen. At this moment, Eden's psychic presence was still fleeing. That fiery woman was dangerous, he needed to get far away, as far as possible. After all, a Gamma-level psyker could not be judged by common sense, she might be able to inflict fatal damage even to his psychic state. Rustle, rustle, rustle. What was that sound? Eden realized he had entered a strange place. In front of him stretched an endless field of green rice, swaying gently in the breeze like emerald waves. Between the rows of rice were small streams, with clear water flowing, and little fish swimming to and fro. For a moment, he felt as if he had returned to the fields of his homeland, and the tension in his heart began to ease. But Eden's daydream was quickly shattered, for he saw a robot in the field, a riveted metal robot. It hummed a little tune, carrying a rusty water tank, laboriously spraying pesticide over the rice. The metal robot suddenly sensed something, turning to face the gate with barely contained excitement in its electronic voice. Welcome to Green Wave Farm, my master. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audiobook YouTube channel. Chapter 13, The Desperate People. The metal robot, Moss, excitedly looked toward the gate, only to find it empty. Master. Moss's electronic voice grew somber, filled with a strange sadness. Ever since Green Wave Farm was established, Moss had been responsible for tending the farm, never stepping beyond its boundaries. Yet, in all the endless years that had passed, the master had never come to check on its work. Moss stood there in a daze, still spraying pesticide from the nozzle in its hand. A gust of wind blew by, carrying the pesticide back towards Moss, hitting its metal body. ZZZZT. Sparks flew as short circuits appeared on Moss's body, but it didn't seem to notice. If the short circuits continued, Moss would most likely die from component failure. Yet, it was trapped in a strange feedback loop, unable to react. Clang! The sky behind Moss turned dark. A large panel fell with a bang, revealing a cold steel wall. Not again. Damn 613th mimetic panel. Moss hastily put down the pesticide sprayer and ran towards the fallen mimetic panel, determined to repair it quickly. It extended two slender mechanical arms from its back, beginning to work on the damaged panel. How many times has this 613th mimetic panel fallen? Moss wondered as it worked. Its mechanical brain instantly retrieved the data, 4,567 times. Oh, damn 613th mimetic panel. As the farm robot, maintaining Green Wave Farm was Moss's responsibility. If nothing unusual happened, it would continue working on Green Wave Farm indefinitely. Repairing the cursed mimetic panel, waiting for that unseen master to finally come and inspect its work. In the void of Green Wave Farm, a psychic beacon pulsed slowly. It was a teleportation marker. In the royal chamber of the spire. Hiss. Eden suddenly awoke, his head pounding. Ah, my lord. A concerned voice came from the maids around him. What's wrong with you? Linda gasped in shock, urging, quick, call the apothecary. No need, I'm fine. Eden knew nothing was seriously wrong, it was just a side effect of withdrawing his consciousness from the warp. The sensation came and went quickly, and he recovered in no time. Eden ordered the maids to leave and stepped onto the balcony, feeling the warmth of the sun on his skin. A small smile crept across his face, and the dark cloud in his heart lifted. He had found the solution. In the depths of the space hulk within the warp, he had discovered a farm from the Golden Age. Not only did the farm contain advanced agricultural techniques and seeds, but it also housed a robot from the Golden Age. That was the true treasure. As for the Imperial ban on AI and intelligent machinery, Eden couldn't care less, the Imperium had no control over him anymore. As long as it was used within reason, what was there to fear? Even if there was a risk, it would only manifest in the distant future. Right now, his priority was to use every available method to strengthen himself, surviving was the top priority. Although he hadn't found powerful weapons or relics on this trip to the warp, discovering a solution to the food problem and a Golden Age robot was a huge win. Once he brought back the Golden Age agricultural technology, along with the help of the robot, he could establish large-scale farms and solve the food shortage. The key now was how to bring those treasures back. Luckily, before running out of energy, Eden had left a psychic teleportation marker at the farm. With enough hope energy, he could activate his miniature son's teleportation ability, open a portal to the farm, and transport everything back. The immediate priority was to find a place to install the psychic core, which would absorb the hope energy from the people. As for the location, Eden had already made up his mind. Carter. Eden called out. Yes, my lord. Carter, the captain of the guard, responded as he entered. His towering frame, nearly 2.5 meters tall, was intimidating even to Eden, who stood 1.8 meters tall. But Carter would never display any sign of disrespect. He knelt in front of Eden, awaiting his orders. Lord Governor. Every time Eden saw Carter, he thought this man would make an excellent space marine. If there was a chance in the future, he would have to form a squad of space marines as his personal guard. In the world of Warhammer 40k, space marines were the ultimate power. Eden brushed aside his wandering thoughts and focused on the task at hand. Accompany me to the sacred plaza. Yes, my lord. Carter, with a determined expression, accepted the order and left to make preparations. Every time Eden traveled, a meticulous security plan was needed to ensure his safety. After all, the Hoffman family wanted him dead, and they had sent countless assassins to make that happen. Caution was always wise. Soon, under Carter's arrangements, Eden boarded his hover vehicle and headed for the sacred plaza. Upon arrival, Eden ordered Carter and the guards to stand watch around the perimeter, while he walked to the center of the plaza, beneath the statue of the God Emperor. The statue, once a symbol of holiness and dignity, was now dilapidated and weathered. Yet, it still exuded a faint aura of authority, inspiring reverence in all who gazed upon it. This was the place Eden had chosen to install the psychic core. Using the statue of the God Emperor as the focal point, the energy from the psychic core would radiate across most of the territory. Eden placed his hand on the statue's base and reached out with his consciousness to the miniature sun in the warp. He would create a secret pathway between the warp and reality, allowing the miniature sun to place the psychic core within the statue. In the warp, the miniature sun grew ever brighter, its energy waves intensifying, stirring a psychic storm. The violent fluctuations of psychic energy triggered a spatial shift. Crack! The void in front of the miniature sun shattered like glass, revealing an irregular rift. Through the rift, the head of the God Emperor's statue could faintly be seen. The path was established. A small orb of light split from the miniature sun, that was the psychic core. The psychic core would serve as an anchor point, stationed in reality, drawing positive emotions from the surrounding area, what Eden called hope energy. The glowing psychic core quickly embedded itself in the head of the God Emperor's statue, anchoring firmly. Afterward, the rift between the warp and reality closed, leaving only an invisible psychic connection between the core and the miniature sun. Eden could faintly sense a bond forming between himself and the statue. Not only could he absorb hope energy, but he could also redirect some of the people's worship of the God Emperor toward himself. Finally, it's done. The entire process took only seconds, but Eden felt completely drained. Lord Governor. Call for backup. When Eden returned to reality, he found himself surrounded by his guards. Carter had deployed his shield, completely covering Eden in an impenetrable barrier. The moment Eden had connected to the miniature sun, Carter had sensed the danger and immediately moved to protect him. As the Lord Governor's captain of the guard, Carter would sacrifice his own life rather than repeat any mistakes. Fortunately, it was just a false alarm. After a thorough inspection and confirming that everything was safe, Carter dismissed the guards and tightened security around the plaza. Eden could still feel the thin thread linking him to the psychic core in the warp. Now, he could continuously absorb hope energy. Once he gathered enough, he could activate the miniature sun's teleportation ability and send himself to the Space Hulk's farm. Eden took a quick mental calculation. If the hope energy generated by an average person was 1 point, he needed 200,000 points to initiate the teleportation. The gap was significant, but he wasn't worried. After all, there were millions of people in his territory. Eden focused on controlling the psychic core, trying to absorb hope energy from his people. 144 points. He was stunned. Hope energy was so scarce. All he could sense from the people was confusion, fear, and helplessness. They were crying out in pain and despair. Darkness was consuming them. Endless hopelessness loomed over his land. Where was the hope? What should he do now? Chapter 14. A failed attempt. Hope energy has dwindled even further. In the governor's office atop the spire, Eden let out a long sigh. He had just attempted to improve the lives of the people to generate more hope energy. But he had failed. He had chosen the most overworked mining crew as a test case. The miners had to navigate complex tunnels to reach the underground mining zones, enduring grueling and dangerous work. Not only did they face frequent cave-ins, but they also had to guard against attacks from mutants. Death had become part of their daily routine. Eden didn't dare make any drastic changes to the production system since the entire economy of his territory was stretched to its limit, maintained in a delicate balance. If he pushed too hard and upset this balance, it would lead to disaster. Even a small disturbance could result in more deaths. So, Eden had simply ordered the head of the mining department to give some workers a day of paid leave, announcing that in the future, there would be a rotation system to ease the pressure on the miners. However, instead of relief, the workers were filled with fear, and the amount of hope energy had decreased further. At that moment, the head of the mining crew, Will, stood before Eden, being questioned. If not for the governor's summons, a small figure like him would never have set foot in the royal district, let alone entered the governor's office in the spire. To meet the governor, Will had splurged on a rare bath and put on his best clothes, though he still looked a bit shabby. "My lord, the workers are terrified." Will spoke, head bowed in fear. Terrified? Yes, they fear that during their leave, someone will take their place. They're saying the mining crews can't survive and are trying to cut down the workforce. Didn't you explain it clearly? We did, but no one believes us. Will bowed his head lower. There are even rumors that there's a terrible ghostly curse in the mines, and soon no one will be able to mine anymore. And what about the leave policy? Hasn't there been any benefit from it at all? Eden pressed. Well, the workers who stayed behind are working even harder. Even if they get injured, they don't dare rest, fearing they'll be removed from the mining crew. Eden immediately corrected him, it's temporary leave, not removal from the crew. Eden now realized how difficult it was to manage people. The plan was sound, but its implementation had gone astray. It was also possible that the policy simply didn't fit the current situation and he had rushed things. Luckily, he had only tried it on a small scale. Otherwise, the outcome could have been disastrous. Yes, temporary leave. That's exactly what I told them. Will said, trembling in fear. He couldn't understand the governor's actions either. By the God Emperor, the governor had given the miners paid leave. Will had never heard of paid leave, nor had he ever seen such a thing. It was such an unprecedented move that it sparked fear, and no one could comprehend why. All Will knew was that times were tough. The miners would rather work themselves to death in the mines than leave. Because leaving meant losing their only source of food, and that meant starvation. Will, like the miners, was confused and lost. Could there really be something wrong with the mines? Or, As the rumors suggested, had the royal district run out of food and could no longer pay the miners their daily wages. The miners were paid daily because no one could guarantee they'd live to see tomorrow's sun. Wages had already dropped from 3 units of corpse starch to 2, and many miner families barely survived on those 2 units. If even those 2 units were withheld, who knew how many people would starve to death? Will couldn't help but think about his own situation. If the mining crew ceased to exist, what would become of him, their supervisor? Without this job, how could he explain it to the others? Where would he go? Times were dire, and at his age, with his physical condition, even the factories wouldn't take him. The thought brought a wave of sorrow, and Will imagined his wife and 2 young daughters starving to death, their bodies dragged away by the corpse collectors. Overcome with sadness, he began to sob. What are we going to do? God Emperor, please save us. The next second, Will realized his outburst and quickly covered his mouth, trying to suppress his emotions. But he couldn't stop the tears from streaming down his face in front of Eden. Eden fell silent. If even Will, the supervisor of the mining crew, didn't trust the royal district or Eden as their governor, how could the common people? Without trust, anything he did would only fuel suspicion. The more he did, the worse it would become. Unless he could truly deliver large amounts of resources and continuously improve the workers' lives, it would be impossible to inspire hope among the desperate miners. But Eden couldn't do that, not yet. The truth was, the food reserves in the royal district were almost depleted. He didn't have enough to distribute. In short, the territory was teetering on the brink of crisis. Eden had a solution to the food problem. He just needed to gather enough hope energy, then activate the teleportation to the Space Hulk's farm to retrieve the Golden Age's agricultural technology and seeds. But his plan was stuck. Without hope energy, he couldn't go. The key was figuring out how to use the remaining resources to create a spark that would uplift the people and generate enough hope energy. My lord, please forgive me for my rudeness. After calming down, Will knelt in fear, begging for Eden's forgiveness. Eden snapped out of his thoughts and shook his head. Get up. I won't hold it against you. Seeing that Will still looked uneasy even after standing up, Eden decided to ask further. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. My lord, will the mining crew continue to operate? The miners need their wages. I swear they won't slack off. Will spoke hesitantly. Yes, Eden reassured him. I promise you, the crew will continue to operate. As for the leave policy, that was my mistake. Go back and tell everyone, everything stays the same. After some thought, Eden decided to temporarily halt the leave policy to prevent further rumors and unrest from spreading. Any system changes needed abundant resources and productivity to support them. The time wasn't right yet, no need to complicate things. If everything fell apart, there would be nowhere for him to cry about it later. Understood, my lord. Hearing this, Will visibly relaxed, even smiling a little. Hope energy +1. Eden sensed that one point of hope energy had emerged from Will. Seeing this, Eden decided to push further. He patted Will on the shoulder. Keep up the good work, and I won't let you down. I will, my lord. Hope energy +1. Eden shook Will's hand, adding enthusiastically, I have great expectations for you. Keep it up, and there'll be promotions and raises in your future. Eden continued painting a hopeful picture, but Will didn't generate any more hope energy, he even seemed a bit fearful. It appeared that words alone had limited impact. With a hint of regret, Eden ended the conversation and dismissed Will. Wait. Just as Will was about to leave, Eden called him back. You have 2 children, right? Yes, they're 5 years old. Will couldn't help but smile when talking about his daughters. Since you're here, take some gifts back for them. Eden pointed to a plate of frosted Poro cookies and colorful candies on the table. Linda had just brought them in, and their sweet scent filled the air. During their conversation, Eden had noticed Will's gaze repeatedly drifting toward the plate of treats. He figured it wouldn't hurt to give Will a small gift. After all, it felt wrong to send him away empty-handed after coming all this way. Coming from a world of abundant material wealth in his previous life, Eden didn't see these items as anything particularly valuable. The Spire's storeroom was stocked with precious foodstuffs, the kind of luxury that only the elite could enjoy, even before the Hive world had fallen into ruin. Someone of Will's status would never have had the chance to taste or even smell such things unless summoned by the governor himself. "My lord," Will stammered, swallowing hard, his voice barely controlled, "you mean these things are for me?" Chapter 15. Sweets and Pastries. Staring at the intricately crafted, colorful sweets and pastries on the plate, Will swallowed hard. Such delicacies he had only ever heard of in tales. Will had once been a miner in the lower hive. During the heretical rebellion, to save his family from starvation, he had resolutely brought his pregnant wife and elderly mother to the upper hive. In the tide of refugees, his mother had starved herself to death, saving the little food they had for his wife, while Will survived thanks to his robust body. Fortunately, after the rebellion ended, the governor took in those refugees. Will became a miner once again and, thanks to his experience and a bit of luck, his predecessors had died in mutant attacks, he eventually climbed to the position of supervisor. His family survived on corpse starch, only indulging in a small piece of sawdust-infused bread every few days. That was considered a rare treat, something most families couldn't even afford. But the food before him now was 100, even 1,000 times more delicious than sawdust bread. Just moments ago, he had secretly inhaled its scent, and the aroma still lingered in his mind. It was an exquisite experience and memory, one he had planned to brag about to his children. Will couldn't begin to imagine how wonderful these sweets would taste in his mouth. Yet, the governor was offering him these heavenly delights. What an honor. Eden nodded in response to Will's hopeful gaze. "Yes, these are for you." He summoned a maid to bring a fresh batch of sweets and pastries, carefully packed in a beautiful gift bag. "Consider this a gift for your children," Eden said as he personally handed the gift bag to Will. Aye. Thank you so much, my lord. The God Emperor will forever protect you." Will was overwhelmed with joy as he gratefully accepted the bag of sweets, tears almost spilling from his eyes. Seeing how such simple sweets could bring so much happiness, Eden couldn't help but sigh. In his heart, he silently vowed that one day, he would make it so that everyone on Aristar could enjoy food like this. It was his duty as a leader. Eden snapped back to the present and patted Will on the shoulder. "Keep working hard, and the royal district will never forget your contributions." "My lord, I pledge my utmost loyalty to you," Will said solemnly, after a moment of silence. Clutching the gift bag tightly, he turned and hurried away. Hope energy plus 100. Eden was stunned. One person had generated so much hope energy. In that instant, he realized that simply making promises wasn't enough, he needed to show real benefits and sincerity. But that was precisely what he lacked the most right now. Eden once again sank into thought, pondering how to achieve the greatest motivational effect with the few resources he had. But no clear solution came to mind. It was difficult. Meanwhile, Will, clutching the gift from the governor, exited the Spire's mansion. "Will, how did it go? What did the governor say? Can the men who were sent home return to the mines?" As soon as he stepped outside, Will was surrounded by his captains, all eagerly clamoring for answers. Each of these captains commanded several hundred miners. If something happened to the mining crew, they wouldn't be able to face their men. It could spell disaster for countless families. A bearded captain pointed at Will's face in shock. "Look, the boss was crying, could it be something bad happened to the mines? Did that bastard in the Spire really plan to lay us off?" Will's expression immediately darkened, and he scolded them, "Shut your mouths, all of you. Stop spouting nonsense." Seeing their boss lose his temper, the captains fell silent, looking sheepish. Wiping his eyes, Will broke into a smile and reassured them. "The mines are fine. Everyone can go back to work as usual. No pay cuts. No layoffs. The governor said everything stays the same." "But what about the men who were sent home?" Will, feeling invigorated, answered, "Tell those lads to come back and work hard. The governor won't forget us." The news stirred excitement among the captains, and they cheered. Suddenly, one of them caught a whiff of something. "Boss, what's that smell? It smells amazing. By the God Emperor, I've never smelled anything so delicious in my life. It's better than a woman's scent." Will proudly patted the gift bag in his arms. "This is something the governor gave me. They're called sweets or something. Anyway, it's food that only the governor gets to eat." The captain stared at the bag in Will's arms, drooling. Food that only the governor could eat, how delicious must it be? The best thing they had ever tasted was sawdust bread. Compared to corpse starch, rancid bugs, mutant rats, and other foul sustenance, sawdust bread didn't make you want to vomit, which made it a delicacy. Under normal circumstances, none of these men would ever get to taste such expensive food in their lifetime. Seeing their longing expressions, Will hesitated for a moment, but his heart softened. As a leader, he knew that when you had something good, you couldn't forget your brothers. It was a lesson he had learned well. It was also one of the reasons his men supported him as their supervisor. As a man from the lower hive, Will owed his rise to the loyalty of his brothers. Carefully opening the gift bag, Will reached inside for a cookie. "You dirty bastards, better clean your hands. Don't you dare defile such precious food," he shouted, grinning. The captains frantically scrubbed their hands clean, lining up and trembling as they extended their hands toward Will, afraid they might drop the treasure. Each man received one cookie. The cookies were still warm, beautifully crafted, and radiating a mouthwatering aroma that seemed to touch their very souls. Their genes had never experienced such flavor, so they couldn't even begin to describe how it tasted. Some men couldn't wait and stuffed the cookies into their mouths, nearly licking their hands clean. But others managed to hold back, carefully wrapping the cookies to save for later. Perhaps they intended to share the treat with their families at home, or maybe they were planning to sell it on the black market. Either way, they wouldn't waste such a precious delicacy. Will carefully gathered the crumbs back into the bag. There was still more than half of the cookies left, and he intended to share them with his children. It would become the happiest memory of their childhood. Surrounded by his men, Will boarded the steam vehicle and headed back to the residential area, to his home on Black Coal Street. As the name suggested, Black Coal Street was home to miner families. They lived and died by the mines. Any tremor in the mines, whether it be an accident, a mutant attack, a pay cut, or layoffs, could plunge entire families into the abyss. On the street, the people looked exhausted, faces gray and listless, with no light left in their eyes. This was the result of long-term hunger. When the people saw Will, they immediately crowded around him. Chapter 16, Black Coal Street. The people of Black Coal Street forced themselves to smile and greet Will as he passed. Many elderly women pulled their children forward, urging them to show off their meager muscles. They begged Will to take the boys into the mining crew, as their families could no longer afford to feed them. Will smiled and responded kindly to each request. He accepted one boy but gently declined the rest. Let them grow a bit more. Sending these little ones into the mines now would be a death sentence, Will said. Despite being rejected, the people maintained their composure and dispersed quietly. In the eyes of the governor, Will might have been just another replaceable figure. But on Black Coal Street, Will was their king. He commanded thousands of miners, holding the livelihood of the residents in his hands. No one dared defy him. Not that they would. Will had earned their respect. Reaching his door, Will turned back to the crowd. Go and let those boys who went home know they can return to work. Don't leave them waiting. As the crowd dispersed, Will pushed open his door and immediately scooped up his two little girls, who came running to him. The door closed, and only the sound of their giggling could be heard. Deeper in the street, in a lowly shack, Mecha and his family were gathered for their midday meal. In truth, they could only afford one meal a day now. They had to finish eating before the sun moved, or else they'd have to eat in the dark, as the sunlight wouldn't reach their shack deep in the street. As for candles, they couldn't afford them. Candles were a luxury. Only Mr. Will and his captains could afford such extravagances on Black Coal Street. Such was the world. Miners dug up energy stones to power the hive, yet couldn't afford to use electricity themselves. Most of the electricity was sent to maintain the shields and air circulation systems of the upper hive or to power the factories. The rest was sent to the royal district to illuminate the night skies there. Mecha watched his son devour the last bit of food with a tender gaze. The boy was 12 now. In a few years, he'd be able to find work, and then there'd be hope for the family. Dad, I'm still hungry, his son whispered. Hungry, yes. Mecha's smile faded. He could see the hunger in his son's eyes. The boy was growing, of course, he was still hungry. But there was no more food left. His wife's hands were crippled, so no factory would hire her. The entire family survived on Mecha's earnings from the mining crew. But yesterday, the mine had put him on paid leave. Mecha didn't quite understand what that meant, but he had received his next day's wages. At first, he had been happy, but the pitying looks from others made him realize this wasn't good news. He had asked the man delivering the news why he couldn't return to work the next day. The man simply replied that it was the governor's orders. Everyone who received wages for the next day had to stay home and was forbidden from going to the mines. Everyone was terrified, asking why. If they didn't go tomorrow, someone might take their place. Would they ever be allowed back? The man couldn't answer and only barked that they had to follow the governor's orders. Then, overseers from the royal district came and drove them away, injuring a few unlucky souls in the process. Dad. Mecha's son tugged on his hand, looking up at him with pleading eyes. Mecha patted his son's head with a heavy heart. Go to sleep. If you sleep, you won't feel hungry. Tomorrow, when I get paid from the mine, I promise to feed you until you're full. Really? His son hesitated as he crawled onto the bed and wrapped himself in the blankets. He sat up again, still unsure. You promise I'll be full tomorrow? You little rascal, when have I ever lied to you? Satisfied with the answer, his son lay back down and soon drifted off to sleep. After a moment of silence, Mecha's wife looked at him with concern. Do you really think you can go back to the mines tomorrow? I don't know, Mecha said, slumping in defeat. Mr. Will went to see the governor. Hopefully, he'll come back with good news. But I've heard people say the royal district is out of food. They say even the governor can't get his hands on a decent loaf of sawdust bread anymore. Mecha's wife was on the verge of tears. They say the mines can't pay that many wages anymore. Once you leave the mines, you'll never be able to go back. She broke down, sobbing into her hands but quickly covered her mouth, afraid of waking their son. God Emperor, are we going to starve to death? When a man in Black Coal Street could no longer work the mines, starvation followed soon after. There were countless such stories here. It was nothing new. But when it happens to your own family, you realize how terrifying it truly is. Seeing his wife in tears, Mecha felt helpless. He didn't know what to say to comfort her. He wasn't confident that he could return to work tomorrow either. Let's wait for news from the mines. Mr. Will speak on our behalf. Mecha forced out the words, then fell silent again. The only sound left in the room was his wife's muffled sobbing. As the midday sun shifted, the light began to fade. The shack, carefully tended by his wife, was slowly swallowed by darkness. And like the shack, so too would this family, just like thousands of others in the upper hive. Gradually, even the sobbing stopped. Only silence and darkness remained. Bang, bang, bang. A loud knocking sounded on the shack's iron door. Mecha instantly tensed, gripping the iron rod he kept by his side. Black Coal Street wasn't completely safe. Strange attacks occurred from time to time. Who is it? It's me, Mecha. A gruff voice replied. The captain. Mecha nearly jumped to his feet, asking eagerly, did Mr. Will get an answer from the governor? Hey, of course. When the boss steps in, it's all taken care of. The captain's voice was cheerful. The governor said the mines will continue as usual. You'll be able to return tomorrow. That's wonderful. Mecha was so overcome with emotion, he could barely speak. Would you like to come in? Mecha's wife, equally excited, invited the captain inside. But she quickly realized there was nothing left to offer him. The figure at the door didn't seem to notice the awkwardness. No need. I've still got to spread the word to the others. The captain turned and left, only to crash into something nearby with a loud clang. Damned Black Coal Street. You can't see a thing after noon. His grumbling faded into the distance. The commotion woke Mecha's son, who rushed out in the dark and hugged his father, scared. What happened? Ha ha ha. It was someone from the mine. Tomorrow, you'll finally get to eat your fill. Mecha, overjoyed, hugged his wife and child. They clung to each other tightly. And somehow, the night didn't seem so dark anymore. Meanwhile, in the spire office of the royal district, Eden furrowed his brow slightly. A maid immediately drew the curtains, preventing the bright sunlight from distracting him. Eden was deeply worried. The territory's food reserves would only last one more month. In other words, he had just 1 month to reach Green Wave Farm in the Space Hulk. He needed to bring back the crops and agricultural technology from the Golden Age. Otherwise, once the food ran out and chaos erupted in the territory, gathering hope energy would become even more difficult. Sigh. Eden switched off the data pad and leaned back in his chair. How am I supposed to foster hope among the people? He felt like he was on the verge of an idea but couldn't quite grasp it. Governor, do you have a moment? Bayev entered the room and bowed to Eden. What is it? Eden asked. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audiobook YouTube channel. Chapter 17, The Imperial Cult. Bayev reminded, My lord, have you forgotten? You need to have your body checked. Please come with me to the chapel. At Bayev's reminder, Eden finally recalled this matter. He had indeed promised to visit Bishop Dani for an examination of his health issues. Seeing Bayev's respectful yet firm demeanor, Eden understood. This senior steward still didn't fully trust him. But it was understandable. After all, Eden had been attacked by chaos heretics and had lost his memory. His behavior had become strange, and anyone would be suspicious. That's why Bayev insisted on bringing him to the chapel for a checkup. If anything was truly wrong, the priests of the Imperial cult would certainly be able to identify it. Bayev was struggling internally, unsure of what to do if the examination revealed a problem. Lord Eden was the last of the Grant family. If something were wrong with him, the family would cease to exist. At that point, where would they go? What would happen to them? For the past few days, Bayev had wrestled with this dilemma. In the end, he had chosen to take Lord Eden for the examination. No matter the result, even if Lord Eden had turned to the dark powers, Bayev would still offer his loyalty. My lord. Bayev anxiously awaited Eden's response, afraid of being refused. Let's go. Eden nodded, agreeing to Bayev's request. This was actually a good thing. It would be a chance to dispel everyone's doubts about him and solidify his identity. Bayev, being his senior steward and most loyal confidant, wielded considerable power and held many secrets. If Bayev continued to harbor doubts about him, it could cause significant trouble down the line. As for the possibility of something being uncovered during the examination, Eden had no fear. His soul had fully merged with Ron Grant's, so no matter who examined him, they would be convinced he was the same person. This could also be an opportunity to clear his mind and maybe even spark some inspiration to solve his current problems. Relieved by the governor's response, Bayev sighed. Please follow me, my lord. Bishop Dani is waiting for you. As Eden followed Bayev, he took the opportunity to ask about the current power structure and control over the royal district. Eden's authority was secure, at least within the territory. After the rebellion, Bayev had been authorized to conduct a major purge. He had taken the opportunity to eliminate opposition in various Imperial agents stationed on the planet. Bayev had attributed their deaths to the heretical rebellion, claiming they had perished in the fight against chaos. Looking at this seemingly kind and gentle steward, Eden couldn't help but think, this guy is something else. Bayev constantly invoked the God Emperor's name, yet didn't seem all that loyal. But, as Eden considered, Bayev's primary mission was to serve and protect the last remaining heir of the Grant family. Any threat to Eden had to be dealt with. Without Bayev, Eden might not have survived until now. Eden could only commend him, well done. I'm glad you understand, my lord, Bayev replied respectfully. Everything is for the continuation of the Grant bloodline. Overall, Bayev was an exceptionally competent steward, possibly even extraordinary. Without him, the royal district might have already fallen. Even the food shortage, which Eden was now struggling with, had been anticipated by Bayev. His plan was to implement stricter controls in the royal district. To preserve the greater good, some people would have to be sacrificed, their bodies processed for protein and water to sustain the military. By doing this, the royal district could survive for a few more decades. By then, the warp storms should have subsided, and the district could re-establish communication with the outside world to seek solutions. If the Imperial reinforcements arrived by then, so much the better. But Eden had rejected Bayev's plan. If it were implemented, it would bring immense suffering to the people, and countless lives would be lost. In that case, how would they be any different from the Hoffman family or the savage warbands? That was something Eden couldn't accept. Moreover, he knew the Great Rift would last much longer. At the far eastern edge of the galaxy, the Ultramarines, homeworld Macragge should currently be engulfed in blood and fire. The Ultramarines would eventually repel the Chaos forces and, in the Sanctum, resurrect their Primarch, Rebute Guilliman, the Lord of Ultramar and the Emperor's 13th son. Once Guilliman awoke, he would serve as the regent of the Imperium, launching an unyielding crusade to liberate countless worlds from the dark side of the galaxy. But that would take time that he did not have. Bayev's plan would merely prolong the inevitable, with the same tragic outcome. Eden had a better solution, but he was facing obstacles. As Eden pondered how to inspire hope among the suffering populace, Bayev's voice interrupted his thoughts. "My lord, we've arrived." The hovercar stopped at the foot of the steps leading to the Imperial cult chapel in the royal district. The chapel was constructed of black stone and heavy metal, its exterior covered in statues depicting scenes from Imperial history and images of saints. At the top was a large stained glass dome, gleaming brightly under the harsh sunlight. Eden stepped out of the car, gazing at the magnificent and solemn structure, feeling a sense of awe. The Imperial cult never failed to impress. Just stepping out of the car, Eden could feel the reverent and mysterious atmosphere. It was a bit deserted, though. There were hardly any people around. Eden glanced at Bayev, wondering, did this guy purge the place too? As the official religion of the Imperium, the Imperial cult was one of the most important organizations in human society. The cult, or the ecclesiarchy, was responsible for spreading and maintaining the belief that the God Emperor was the one true deity. The ecclesiarchy was vast, with a presence on millions of imperial worlds, guiding countless citizens in their worship. Its headquarters were located on Holy Terra, covering almost the entire continent of Antarctica. The church promoted the emperor's worship through its teachings and maintained a powerful militant arm. Fanatical priests carried both scripture and guns, often wielding chainswords. Anyone who desecrated the emperor faced the harshest judgment. With such power, it would be difficult for the royal district to purge the ecclesiarchy, right? And besides, purging the God Emperor's most loyal servants would be an unspeakable heresy. In this universe, gods did exist, and the Emperor was practically one. Even if it was unlikely, what if the Emperor himself got angry and brought down divine punishment? Who could withstand that? Eden eyed Bayev with suspicion. What exactly was going on here? Chapter 18. Bishop Dani. By the God Emperor, how could I dare commit such heresy? Bayev was horrified when Eden questioned him about the chapel. It was clear he held the Emperor and the church in great reverence. With a solemn expression, Bayev addressed Eden. If not for the church's help, the royal district would have fallen long ago under the heretics' assault. Bayev recounted the events from years past, when the nobles had allied with heretic followers and invaded the royal district. They had driven the citizens to the Holy Square, intending to perform a blood sacrifice of thousands of lives to desecrate the statue of the God Emperor. This was a common tactic among the heretics. Every time they conquered a place, they would desecrate the Emperor's statues and slaughter all loyal followers. Such blasphemy was something the church could never tolerate, and so they fought back with all their might. The fanatical priests and militant crusaders, wielding hammers and staves, had charged the front lines, determined to defend the emperor's glory. In the end, the heretic rebels were driven out of the upper hive, but the church suffered heavy casualties, nearly being wiped out. Now, only Bishop Dani Moore and a handful of clergy remained in this chapel. As Eden followed Bayev up the tall steps, Carter led the bodyguards behind them. Since they were entering the chapel, they had left their heavy weapons behind. Soon, the group entered the grand hall of the chapel. Upon stepping inside, Eden was immediately struck by the aura of solemnity and sanctity. Sunlight streamed down through the towering stained glass dome, which depicted the emperor leading the Primarchs against the forces of chaos. In the air, cherubic figures with mechanical wings and strips of scripture wrapped around their bodies floated above, their mechanical components visible in places. These were the church's cherubim. Cherubim resembled childlike angels but were artificial creations, hybrids of flesh and mechanical augmentations, anointed with sacred oils. They held the same status as servitors but possessed a certain degree of independence and intelligence, serving the priests of the imperial cult. As the holy light poured down, the cherubim flew to Eden's side, singing hymns of praise to the God Emperor. Eden felt a pair of eyes on him. He turned to see an elderly priest in a robe staring intently at him. This was Bishop Dani Moore, the last bishop of the Urth Church. He appeared quite frail, leaning on a staff adorned with the symbol of the Aquila and inscribed with sacred texts. His sharp, hawk-like eyes were locked on Eden. Did he see something? Why is he staring at me like that? Eden felt uneasy. Just as he began to worry, Bayev spoke up, sensing the tension. Bishop Donnie's eyesight isn't the best. Bayev then raised his voice, addressing the bishop. Your Excellency, the governor has arrived. Upon hearing this, Bishop Donnie's eyes lit up, and his gaze softened. He quickly made his way over to them. Praise the God Emperor. The bishop grasped Eden's hand enthusiastically. Governor, you've finally arrived. His overly warm attitude left Eden confused. What's going on? It seemed Bayev was quite familiar with Bishop Donnie, as he spoke candidly. As we discussed, our Lord was attacked by heretics and needs your help for an examination. Hearing this, the bishop nodded. Of course, I've been waiting for this. Let's begin right away, Bishop Donnie said, his sharp eyes studying Eden before leading him to the altar of the emperor. The altar was surrounded by lit candles, filling the air with the thick scent of sacred oils. You may relax, Bishop Donnie said, patting Eden's hand and signaling for him not to be nervous. Through a psychic link, he commanded the cherubim to fetch holy water, which they then sprinkled on Eden while he began reciting sacred prayers from the scriptures. The bishop closed his eyes, chanting loudly, while the cherubim circled above him, harmonizing with his prayer. Bayev stood behind them, tense as he awaited the outcome. He exchanged a glance with Carter. They had prepared for this moment before arriving. If anything went wrong during the examination or if Bishop Donnie showed any signs of aggression, they were ready to protect Eden at all costs and withdraw from the chapel. Whether Eden had fallen to darkness or made a pact with a demon, they were prepared to follow him to the end. Such was their unquestioning loyalty. As the prayers reached their peak, Eden felt a psychic force envelop him, probing his body and soul. As expected, the priests can use something akin to psychic energy, Eden mused. Though they were not psychers, it was clear that their devout worship of the God Emperor produced effects similar to psychic abilities. Bishop Donnie was using the Emperor's will to examine Eden. For an ordinary person, this scrutiny would have revealed everything. Even powerful psychers would have their secrets laid bare under the bishop's gaze. No darkness could escape the Emperor's will. However, Eden had not fallen to darkness, and with the power of the little sun within him, his psychic abilities far surpassed the bishop's. Under Eden's control, the psychic energy from the little sun quickly shielded his consciousness while allowing the bishop to examine a portion of Ron Grant's soul. After a short while, the psychic force withdrew from Eden's body, signaling the end of the examination. Bishop Donnie looked up, smiling. The Emperor protects. There are no traces of heresy on you, and the warp has not had much of an effect. Your body and soul are fine, though you seem a bit physically weak. You should rest and take it easy. He gave Eden a knowing look. Eden immediately understood. The bishop was suggesting that he was, well, physically exhausted. All Eden could do was nod in agreement. After all, he had only recently escaped the palace of Slanesh and was indeed feeling quite drained. Just make sure to rest, and everything will be fine, Bishop Donnie concluded. By the God Emperor, it's a relief to know our Lord is unharmed. Hearing this, Bayev finally relaxed, a rare smile crossing his normally stern face. Thank you, Your Excellency. I merely follow the Emperor's guidance, tending to lost sheep, Bishop Donnie responded humbly. He then turned back to Eden with a more serious look. Governor, there's something I need you to clarify. You are a psyker now, aren't you? Eden's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly remembered something. The church didn't have a good opinion of psykers. The Imperial cult represented many aspects of the Imperium itself, using its teachings to unite humanity in service to the Emperor. The church's core tenets were known as the Imperial Creed. These included the belief that all humans must worship the Emperor, hatred of Xenos and heretics, and the understanding that psykers and mutants among humanity posed a dangerous threat that had to be controlled. The priests of the church would give their lives to uphold these tenets and maintain their loyalty to the Emperor. Falling into the church's hands as a psyker was a dangerous situation. The most likely outcome was imprisonment, followed by being sent to Holy Terra aboard a black ship for further processing. Governor. Bishop Donnie's gaze remained fixed on Eden, awaiting an answer. Chapter 19, The Radical Doctrine. Yes, Your Excellency, I have indeed recently become a psyker, Eden answered Bishop Donnie's question directly. He noticed that when the bishop asked this, Bayev's expression remained unchanged, and there was no reaction from anyone around him. This meant that his position was safe, and there was no need to hide anything. Besides, there was little reason to fear the church now. The Imperium's reach wouldn't extend to Urth anymore. Upon hearing Eden's confirmation, Bishop Donnie didn't seem overly surprised. He simply nodded. He continued to smile. It seems the psychic scan didn't lie. You must often hear the call of the warp, which is not a good sign. He went on to explain a few things about being a psyker and what to watch out for. Eden listened attentively, but he couldn't help but ask, Your Excellency, I am a psyker. Doesn't that concern you? After all, according to the Church's doctrines, psykers were treated like mutants, a dangerous existence that needed to be controlled or eradicated. Bishop Donnie paused for a moment, his expression growing serious as he looked at Eden. Do you acknowledge the God Emperor as the one true God of this world? Of course, I am the most loyal servant of the great God Emperor. Eden answered without hesitation, his voice booming with conviction, almost ready to shout his oath. Whether he believed it or not, this was the only possible answer. In the Imperium, faith in the God Emperor was the ultimate political correctness, the only true path. If you didn't believe, then you were a heretic, destined for judgment and execution. Praise the God Emperor. Bishop Donnie nodded in satisfaction. Faith in the Emperor is the only true path. Every lamb that worships the God Emperor should be treated equally, and more so, your body and soul have not been tainted. You are safe. Psykers, too, can earn the Emperor's favor. Look at the astropaths, their contributions cannot be dismissed. They, like us, have given everything to serve the great God Emperor. As he spoke, Bishop Donnie's demeanor became more fervent. In my view, it doesn't matter who you are, what race you belong to, or even if you are unclean. As long as you worship the God Emperor. Then you are a lamb of the Emperor, a loyal follower of the Church. The Emperor's love is equal, and his light shines upon all creation. Watching the impassioned bishop, Eden finally understood. This man was a fanatical believer in the God Emperor, but his beliefs were even more radical. Within the Church, there were many doctrinal factions, but most priests considered mutants and abumans to be unclean, untouchable. Bishop Donnie had likely kept his radical beliefs hidden when there were others to watch over him. But now, with Urth left to him as the last high-ranking priest, he no longer had to hold back. He could say whatever he wanted, and no one could challenge him. He alone held the power to interpret the doctrine. What do you think, Governor? Bishop Donnie asked, slightly out of breath after his passionate speech. He seemed to be waiting for Eden's reaction. The atmosphere became tense for a moment, but Eden quickly broke the silence with an enthusiastic response. Praise the God Emperor. I understand now. Eden played along, acting as if he had just received divine inspiration. As you said, the benevolent God Emperor equally protects all those willing to offer their loyalty. No matter how far-fetched the bishop's teachings were, Eden would express his support. After all, he would need Donnie's backing in the future to bolster his own religious legitimacy. Within the Imperium, those without the approval of the God Emperor, or rather, the Church, would find it nearly impossible to move forward. Praise the God Emperor. I am honored by your understanding, Bishop Donnie beamed with joy. Most people who heard his views either didn't dare respond or outright condemned them as heretical. Some had even threatened to have him burned at the stake. Fortunately, Donnie Moore was the disciple of a high-ranking archbishop, or he would have been executed long ago. Though he had avoided death, as punishment, he had been exiled from the Holy Land and sent to the far-flung planet of Urth. Now, as the only bishop left on the planet, Donnie could finally spread his radical beliefs freely. He even fantasized about converting chaos demons or powerful Xenos species into loyal followers of the God Emperor. He wanted to show the stubborn old men back at the Holy Land who the true loyal servant of the Emperor was. All right, Governor, let's return to discussing your situation. Resisting the warp's influence is no simple matter. Bishop Donnie said, once again taking Eden's hand, his face filled with compassion and a smile that was hard to refuse. He continued to explain meditation techniques, ways to calm the mind and resist the corruption of the warp. Afterward, he had the cherubim bring out several blessed relics. The relics, made from special bones and anointed with sacred oils, emitted a faint glow. According to Bishop Donnie, these relics had been blessed by the God Emperor himself and were effective in resisting the influence of the warp. Relics of the church were incredibly rare, cherished by the priests as if they were their very lives. They were kept in altars and worshipped day and night, rarely given away. Eden was baffled by this practice. If something so valuable existed, why wasn't it being used? Keeping these relics locked away in altars seemed like a waste. Before his fall to Slaanesh's corruption, Eden had repeatedly requested relics from the church, but had always been denied. If he had possessed such relics back then, perhaps he wouldn't have been so easily drawn into the palace of Slaanesh. But now, things seemed to have changed. Are these relics, for me? Eden asked, astonished as he looked at the precious items before him. Were they really just giving these to him? Please, Governor, accept these gifts. There's no need to be modest. Bishop Donnie cheerfully handed the relics to Eden, almost as if he were afraid he wouldn't take them. For a moment, Eden felt as though he were back home during a festival, with relatives stuffing red envelopes into his hands. Oh, I couldn't possibly. Eden said, pretending to be humble, but his hands didn't stop moving as he eagerly took the relics. As soon as he held them, he felt their weight and nearly collapsed under the burden. So heavy. Though his body was still weak, these relics were far heavier than he had expected. It was hard to imagine how the elderly bishop could have handled them so easily. Bishop Donnie, noticing Eden's struggle, quickly steadied him, looking worried. Are you all right? Bayev, realizing the issue, motioned for Carter to step forward and take the relics away. Once he had caught his breath, Eden was reminded of how physically strong the native people of Warhammer 40k were. Even an old man like Donnie had such impressive strength. The little incident left Bishop Donnie flustered, and he repeatedly apologized to Eden. In an attempt to make amends, he even offered Eden another high-grade relic, a finely crafted dagger, highly effective against chaos creatures. Eden accepted the dagger with satisfaction, but he couldn't help but wonder why the bishop was being so overly generous. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Something was going on, and Eden couldn't quite figure out what. What could possibly prompt Bishop Donnie to offer him such extravagant gifts? Chapter 20, The Request. Eden cautiously regarded Bishop Donnie. Your Excellency, if there's something you need, just say it. Bishop Donnie's attitude became even more fervent. Governor, the statue of the God Emperor needs to be restored. However, the church lacks the manpower and resources to complete this task, and we require your help. The statue of the God Emperor had been desecrated by heretics, and the church did not have the means to repair it. For this, Donnie felt deep shame. Such desecration was a grievous affront. Restoring the towering 100-meter statue of the Emperor would require significant manpower and resources. However, the entire upper hive was currently in a dire situation, with supplies, including food, critically low. In times like these, no ruler would willingly divert resources to such a demanding and seemingly unproductive task. The church had requested aid from the governor's office multiple times before, but they were always rejected. The church was left powerless. Due to the warp storms, the Astronomican beacon in the Gori sector had long since dimmed. The Emperor's light no longer shone upon Earth, leaving the church's influence drastically diminished. Now, strength dictated who was in charge. Restoring the statue. Eden frowned. He was no fanatic and didn't fully grasp Donnie's obsession. Moreover, the situation in the governor's district was terrible, and he couldn't afford to waste resources on something that wouldn't yield immediate benefits. He opened his mouth, prepared to refuse. I'm sorry, but the district is unable to. Governor. Donnie urgently grabbed Eden's hand, fearing another rejection. I understand this is a difficult task, but in such dark times, the faithful need the God Emperor's guidance more than ever. At these words, Eden felt a spark of inspiration. An idea to dispel the despair among the populace began to take shape. What did you say? Eden tightened his grip on Donnie's hand. Please, repeat what you just said. Faith shelters all beings. The people long for salvation. Donnie's expression was resolute. Only the Emperor's light can pierce through this darkness. That sentence struck Eden like a bolt of lightning, clearing the fog in his mind. He had found the solution to his problems. The answer was to use the power of faith to banish despair. As someone from a modern world, Eden had overlooked the importance of faith, he had not experienced the trials of his forebears. But in the grimdark universe of Warhammer 40k, faith was not something to be ignored. It could be said that worship and faith in the God Emperor were the true foundations of the Imperium. The more desperate the times, the more people would need the strength that came from their faith. Otherwise, they would soon succumb to hopelessness and turn to the dark gods for salvation. Governor. Donnie's voice broke through Eden's thoughts, concerned by his silence. Eden snapped back to reality, suppressing his excitement as he nodded in agreement to Donnie's request. The district will fully support the restoration of the Emperor's statue. Once it's completed, the Holy Plaza will be open for all to gaze upon the magnificence of the God Emperor. Not only would the statue be restored, but Eden planned to make it a grand project, one that would rally the people. He would gather all available resources and stage a miracle. And when the time came, Eden would present himself as the chosen of the God Emperor, the savior of Urth, to reignite hope in the hearts of his people. This was the broad outline of his plan, the specifics would require careful planning. Your Excellency, the God Emperor will bless you. Donnie beamed with joy upon hearing Eden agree to the statue's restoration. He enthusiastically recited several blessings, some of which seemed to have benefits related to, well, improving certain aspects of life. The church certainly knew how to appeal to people. In truth, Eden appreciated the church's skill in rallying support, it was exactly what he needed for his plan. But the challenge now was figuring out how to fully bring Donnie to his side. Convincing Donnie wouldn't be easy. Priests of the Imperial cult operated independently, and in terms of legitimacy and sanctity, they were often considered above local rulers. In general, they focused only on spreading the faith of the God Emperor and building grand churches to honor him. They avoided political matters unless a ruler's disloyalty or interference with the faith became an issue. For the church, disloyalty was absolute treachery. A disloyal ruler would be branded a heretic, and the priests would act in the name of the emperor, judging and executing such traitors. Of course, this only applied when the church had sufficient military power to back it up. If the ruler was strong and backed by chaos or Xenos, the priests could end up crucified on inverted crosses beneath broken emperor statues as a mark of defiance. In short, these priests were fanatical and difficult to win over. Drawing Donnie fully into Eden's fold would take time. But now that Eden had agreed to the restoration, there would be plenty of future opportunities to work on it. With a smile, Eden felt this visit to the church had been extremely fruitful. Not only had he dispelled Bayev's doubts and solidified his position, but he had also found a way to break the people's despair and reignite their hope. Having accomplished his mission, Eden bid Bishop Donnie farewell. The bishop personally escorted Eden to the church doors, and before he left, he pressed several bottles of valuable holy water into Eden's hands as a parting gift. Your Excellency, once the restoration plans are finalized, I will return to discuss them with you. Feeling overwhelmed by Donnie's enthusiasm, Eden hurried into the hovercar. The church awaits your return, Donnie said earnestly. He watched as Eden's hovercar disappeared into the distance, heading toward the spire of the governor's district. Once the car was out of sight, Bishop Donnie's smile slowly faded. He stared at the empty plaza outside the church, feeling an overwhelming sense of exhaustion. God Emperor, your loyal servant seeks your guidance, what should I do? Ever since the catastrophic warp storm had cut off Urth from the rest of the Imperium, the church's connection to Terra had been severed. Even the Emperor's guiding light had flickered and gone out. Then came the heretics and chaos cultists. They had dared to desecrate the statue of the Emperor, and the church's priests had been slaughtered nearly to extinction. Donnie could feel it, the world was being swallowed by darkness. Something unspeakable and terrible was brewing, slowly consuming the life force of Urth, draining its last vestiges of hope. For days, he had prayed countless times, yet received no answer. Would he ever be able to rebuild the church? Did the people of Urth still have a future? Had the God Emperor truly abandoned them? Sometimes such dreadful thoughts crept into Donnie's mind, but he quickly stamped them out. They were blasphemous thoughts. Doubt was betrayal. The God Emperor was the only protector and shelter of all living beings. He would never abandon his loyal servants. With a deep breath, Donnie reaffirmed his faith. His hawk-like eyes regained their sharpness, filled once more with resolute light. He would fight the darkness to the end and give everything for the God Emperor. With renewed determination, Donnie climbed the grand steps of the church, his cherubim hovering behind him, singing hymns of praise to the Emperor. Thank you for watching. Continue exploring the fascinating world of Chinese novels with us. Hit that subscribe button on Chinese Novel Audiobook to stay updated with our latest stories. And never miss out on a great listen.